of the United States.
Hello and welcome to Roll Call's State of the Union Watch Party. I'm Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor-in-chief, joined here in our Roll Call newsroom by senior editor David Hawkins. We're going to be with you all night long, giving analysis of what we expect from the president's address, his sixth such State of the Union address to Congress. We're also going to have Steve Dennis, our White House correspondent, who is busily working on our story, previewing the speech, and also with a little bit of embargoed bits that we're about to publish at rollcall.com. You should be following us on Twitter at Roll Call, and you can watch both the speech here and the Republican response from Senator Joni Ernst, freshman senator. Also, we've got Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor, live in Statuary Hall. She's going to be interviewing members of Congress tonight after the speech, getting reaction from the people who really matter, the power players in this debate, and what will happen once the president actually leaves that chamber. So we're going to check Shira now. How is it looking in Statuary Hall? From Senator Joni Ernst.
Well, right now it feels sort of like the eye of the storm, right? Most of Congress has already passed through the Statuary Hall, including several members of President Obama's administration. We saw John Kerry file through, as well as several Supreme Court justices as well. And everyone's just waiting for the last few remainders to walk into the House chamber before the president starts his big speech in a few minutes.
All of the big television networks are interviewing pretty much anyone that will come through that chamber. It's sort of in between the rotunda, the middle of the Capitol, and the House chamber where the speech actually takes place. So what does this seem like there? Are lots of television networks getting set up, and are you expecting it to be really crowded and loud tonight?
Yeah, it's pretty quiet right now, but I certainly don't expect it to stay that way. I would say the reporter to lawmaker ratio right now in this room is probably about 10 to 1. It's filled with reporters, filled with really bright lights angled in every direction, and probably about 30 to 35 different television cameras set up in front of all of these statues. You can see behind me is Huey Long, the former governor and senator for Louisiana. So it's really kind of a regal hall. It's just an exciting atmosphere. Even though this is his 7th State of the Union address, it is you can still sense the excitement in the room.
Reversed positions last year when Roll Call did its first ever State of the Union Watch Party. I was there in Statuary Hall interviewing members. You were here anchoring. We've certainly improved our studio setup here in the newsroom, but this is, television on the internet, so people should bear with us. We've got a little bit of a delay on some of the scenario. We want to give a special shout out to Earth Justice, our sponsor for tonight's live stream, and point you to all the other things that we're going to be doing tonight. We've got the SOTU in 3 words project that we're doing via Twitter and Instagram. That's essentially the hashtag SOTU in 3 words. And we've got CQ and Roll Call journalists in the Capitol, and they're going to be talking to members after the speech, getting their take.
I figured I'd be calling around to senior members for whom the luster of the evening had worn off, and finding that they would say, sure, I've been to 20 of these, I'm not going to go anymore. I called a dozen offices. They are all going. They all think it's important to be there for a variety of different reasons, one of which is there's not much else going on in Washington tonight. It's one of the few nights in the year where there are no fundraisers going on, so there's nothing else competing for a member of Congress's attention. Number 2, even though the TV ratings are down, an audience of 30 or 33 million is nothing to sneeze at, and you can actually be caught on camera glimpsing the president. You don't get to be seen by your constituents that often back home. And then the other reason is there's just sort of a lot of these members of Congress still have sort of a civic bone in their body, and they think, this is one of the rare affairs of state, big ceremonial occasions in Washington, and it's sort of what you get paid to show up at, and they're going to show up.
Now, we're going to be showing you scenes from the chamber in a few minutes and let you know what we're looking at, as members come in and start greeting one another. A lot of them have been there all day long, saving seats, and we certainly know that is a tradition that we've held long. But we're also going to be having all kinds of coverage at rollcall.com. The speech, we just got the remarks as prepared for delivery, so we're publishing a story at rollcall.com detailing what's in that. You should definitely be checking out Steve Dennis's work there. And again, follow us at Roll Call. We also have a a really deep profile of Joni Ernst, telling you all about her background, how she came to be. And I'll give you a little sneak peek of tomorrow's Roll Call front page. We do have a story looking at Joni Ernst and her role within the Republican Party and whether or not that might be elevated after her response tonight. How are you expecting Republicans to receive this speech, David?
Well, I think it's almost become a bigger cliche than ever in the past couple of years, the notion that the Democrats will stand up and applaud whenever the president, opens his mouth, and the Republicans will sit on their hands. I think the Republicans now have learned that it makes some sense for them to go out of their way to find things to applaud at. The voters say they want Congress to get along, they want common sense solutions, all this rhetoric about bipartisanship. They say that on the one hand, but yet they sort of vote for continued divided government. Anyway, it means that the Republicans will try to find things to applaud, and I don't think we will see anything like what happened famously 4 years ago. Not a State of the Union night, but a different time that the president came to the hall of the House to talk about health care. A member of Congress from South Carolina named Joe Wilson famously called out, "You lie." Republicans were told at that point that's the one and only time that is ever going to happen. So I think they'll be polite, if nothing else.
That was a nice little tease for our Heard on the Hill column, which a couple days ago looked at who could be the outbursts in tonight. Or I guess that's this morning's paper. It's been a long day. Who could be the potential outbursts? Obviously, Congressman Wilson is on there. Also, Dave Bratt, the Republican who was able to oust the then Majority Leader Eric Cantor in a primary last June. And he was one of the first people in the chamber tonight saving a seat. So we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on him.
Right, that was fascinating. Usually it's the same old players, usually some big city members who never get on TV back home. Sheila Jackson Lee, Democrat of Houston, Ileana Ross-Slaton, Republican of Miami, Elliot Engel, Democrat of the Bronx. They tend to quite literally mark their territory at about noon with their briefcases or signs, don't tread on my seat, all for that one moment where they can look polite.
And any president. It has nothing to do with the fact that
That's
the
right.
president is a Democrat
Elliot Engel
or
did it for
Republican.
Ronald Reagan,
Yeah.
Bill
And
Clinton.
it's really an area where you see people are in a good mood, even if they're sitting on their hands for a certain tax reform line that they don't like. They want to show respect to the president by and large.
Right. They want to show that they are being respectful in the moment. It'll be interesting to see what Dave Bratt does, whether he reaches out to shake the president's hand so that he can then say to his constituents, "I'm all about being polite and giving the president his due. However, every darn thing that he said I disagree with."
In a similar vein, you wrote a little bit about the congressional picnic and how that's something
Right.
that members, it used to be a really big deal for them to be able to go and say they had this FaceTime with the president. It happened in September.
That's right.
Obviously before the elections.
This is also that's right. It's an interesting thing to bring up because I think people watching at home may not realize how rare it is for the vast majority of members of Congress, and even actually for the leadership, to actually come face to face with the president. Right. It's not like they see each other, on the subway in the morning or in the Capitol. The president doesn't come to the Capitol very often. So this is a very rare moment. The president, I think it looks like he's going to go down in modern history as having probably the least good congressional relations with even members of his own party in my 25 years in Washington. So a little bit of feel good, shake hands, back slapping, attaboy, autograph, kiss on the cheek can go a long way.
Well, we are seeing scenes of the House floor now. Shira Center, our politics editor, again, is in Statuary Hall. We'll be coming back to her after the speech. She'll be talking to several different members to get their take, the real power corridors of Washington, what's going to matter after the president's speech. It's a big question for the president of does he take a defiant tone and remind everybody that he's got the veto pen and that he will veto things that he doesn't agree with, or does he try to talk about the things that they work together on? And the early indications that we're seeing of the speech and what Steve has written that is going live now really says that the president is not shying away from the fact that he has that veto pen, and he is saying there are things that he staunchly disagrees with Republicans on. What do you see as the best areas of compromise potentially for tonight?
Oh, I think the two that everybody seems to be talking about, and even some of the there's also a tradition in Washington called the pre-buttal. It's not the rebuttal, it's the pre-buttal, where many members of Congress, generally from the opposite party from the president's, actually put out their reactions to the speech even before it's been delivered. And what you see even in those are two areas of agreement. Trade, which it doesn't rank high on the list of American concerns, except that it's a stand-in for job creation. Both the president and most Republicans think that trade liberalization, especially if it leads to a trade deal with Asia, will be a big-time job creator. That'll make the country happy. It's a way for the president to work more with Republicans than Democrats. Most Democrats don't like trade liberalization at this point because they think it'll harm labor and environmental rules around the world. So that's number one. I also think number two would be some sort of public works bill. I predict there's going to be some sort of highway bill this year.
Infrastructure is something that people tend to agree on when they're having
Right.
conversations, and then when you get to the numbers.
And they say, well, how are we going to pay for this? And
see
then it
what
all falls
happens.
apart.
So we're looking at scenes of the House chamber. So one of the things that they do is they sort of form these organizing committees to welcome the president into the chamber. And so they'll announce who they are, and then they'll come out, and then they'll bring the president in, and there's a lot of cheering and handshaking. So it tends to take the president, 10 minutes or so to get up to that actual podium where you see Joe Biden, the vice president, and John Boehner are right now. One of the members I see prominently in the screen here is Billy Long, who's really glad-handing. Not everybody knows he was an auctioneer before coming to Congress. He won in the Tea Party wave in 2010.
This is clearly an emerging tradition. I remember clearly talking about Billy Long a year ago tonight, being in the exact same place.
Maybe he was one of the
So
ones staking out.
he's one of the newbies. Yeah, there's going to be two rounds of cheering, right? When the doorkeeper of the House announces that the president is in the doorway, he comes down the aisle really slowly.
Everybody stops.
Everybody
and the photographers are there.
And that's right. It's also one of the rare nights where our colleagues in the photographic press corps get some unusual access to the room, and the TV camera angles are a little bit different. Anyway, it takes a long time to come down there, and then there's a pause, and then Speaker Boehner introduces him again, and then there's another tumultuous. And it always seems to be just about as tumultuous whether the president's approval rating is at 90% or 30%.
And speaking of the president's approval rating, it's actually on the rebound a little bit.
It's inching up to almost a half.
Yeah, he's had a better couple of weeks, and in part because of the rebounding economy. And one thing that I've noticed when studying the themes that they've leaked ahead of the speech, in addition to some of the things he's promised, we'd like to invest in our people, but he's had this very specific theme of our economy is doing better, and we want to make sure everyone feels that, not just the people on the top. So that's clearly one of the reasons.
And he's going to declare, from the excerpts that we've gotten, he's sort of going to, there's always a one punchy line. Bill Clinton famously said, the era of big government is over. Tonight, the president is apparently going to say, just if you thought that the recession was still going, it's not, and it's time to turn the page. Essentially, he's declaring all this discussion about economic turmoil can now be over.
It's done.
It's now, we're done. We're through with that, and we're moving on. And we'll see if the public buys that.
Yeah, and the president, what he said in a YouTube address yesterday, sort of previewing the speech, was basically that he wants everybody to feel part of this recovery. And so some of the things he's going to be showcasing are people who have done well thanks to his policies. He's got someone who benefited from the Affordable Care Act. He's got someone who benefited from minimum wage increase. So that is in president's prerogatives to be able to do that. And of course, every member of Congress has their own thing they'd like to showcase as well. What are some of the interesting guests we've seen?
That's right. Boy, that's a little bit of a stump. I haven't read but a couple of. Every member of Congress gets to invite one guest because the gallery around the House chamber really isn't big enough for more than 535 guests.
And all of those people at the top there, that's all journalists.
Those are all
sort of hang
our
over
buddies
at the top of
right, they get the best view. So it's a mix of, you're right, it's if you're a Republican, it's likely to be a small business person from your district, somebody who you think would benefit from trade liberalization or a overhaul of the corporate tax code or a road builder. And if you're a Democrat, it's probably a middle, could be also a business person. It could be a labor union member from your district or a rabbi. A lot of people like to invite religious leaders to come to these things. But you're right, they generally pick and choose to make a tiny point that they hope will get them in the local press.
We haven't talked yet about Cuba and the president's changing policy toward Cuba, and so you've seen several members bringing in anti-Castro guests to be with them tonight. So that's, last year it was Duck Dynasty, this year it is anti-Castro.
Right, and Vance McAllister, the Duck Dynasty star is not back because his host, Vance McAllister, the Republican from Louisiana, was not returned to Congress after he was caught busing an aide.
So one of the other things that you've written quite a bit about is what this new Congress looks like. We will be seeing more women, more younger people than ever before. You talk a little bit about how we've seen the face of Congress really change over the last few months.
It has changed, and whenever I write about the face of Congress is changing, I try to include in what I write, and if I don't, people will tweet back at me that I got it wrong. You know, it still doesn't look just like America, right? It's become 20%. 20%.
Here's the
Here's the
president
president now,
walking in, yeah.
and you'll see he's surrounded by a disproportionate number of women. The Congress is only 20% female. From that shot, it looks like a country. That shot right there makes it look like the Congress reflects the population of the country.
Another person who used to frequently be up close was Michelle Bachmann. She
Right.
retired
She
at the
did.
end of last year, so she will not be coming back. And we're on a little bit of a delay from what we're seeing to what people are hearing us talking about. But essentially, the president is coming in and greeting, basically everybody through the aisle. Right behind him is newish Majority Leader
Right.
Kevin McCarthy, and very new Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who was given that post after Republicans had historic gains and reclaimed control of the chamber last fall. Steve Scalise is there in the welcoming crowd. That's pretty typical. There's Nancy Pelosi. They have House leadership, but then they also have certain designees. Sometimes that might be a prominent freshman or someone they'd like to showcase.
Members of the president's congressional delegation, the Illinois delegation usually represented. And it's interesting, you talk about people crossing the aisle. The way I see it, the president's coming down the aisle, and it's packed with Democrats on both sides. Most of those women that are on the president's right there are loyal liberal Democrats, except now he's shaking hands with the famous auctioneer we just talked about.
He also reached over someone else to shake the hand of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the current Democratic National Committee chairwoman, who has actually gotten some negative press from some of the president's loyalists questioning what kind of job she's done leading that committee. But she's still there, and he made a point to shake her hand, which, what do you know? He also just shook the hand of Ways and Means Chairman Paul D. Ryan. He was the budget chairman, very prominent fiscal voice for this Congress, and really we're expecting quite a bit when you start to see these budgets, and this is the year where legislating could happen.
The legislative process at least will happen. Whether laws get made in the end, I think probably not, but Paul Ryan, who we just saw there, will be at the center of a budget process that will probably move along on a more routinized basis than we've seen in quite some time. The president has promised to send his budget to Congress on time for the first time in about 3 years. That means that all Republican Congress will have no excuse but to get their budget resolution done on time, and then that will set the stage for the big debates, maybe on a tax overhaul, maybe on trade, etc. It's interesting. We'll see.
He's greeting the Supreme Court there now.
Right.
He gave a very warm embrace to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and then moved on down the line. Warmly greeted Chief Justice John Roberts. His cabinet
and the one who's missing there, I'm pretty sure he's missing.
Anthony Fox.
No, well, there's Anthony Fox, but in the Supreme Court, only a couple of people who's ever actually announced that he's going to boycott the State of the Union was Justice Alito.
Yes.
After the president made some pretty caustic comments about a campaign finance ruling that the Supreme Court had delivered just a few years ago, Alito said, it's too political, I'm not going anymore.
Let's listen in on the House chamber, because they're about to do the official announcement of the president here, and then we'll be listening to the speech. Stick with rollcall.com. We'll play this. We will also have the Republican response following that, and then we'll be back to Shira Center and Statuary Hall interviewing members of Congress.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States. Thank you. Thank you so much, please. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans. We are 15 years into this new century. 15 years that dawned with terror touching our shores,
that unfolded with a new generation fighting two long and costly wars, that saw a vicious recession spread across our nation and the world. It has been and still is a hard time for many. But tonight, we turn the page. Tonight, after a breakthrough year for America, our economy is growing and creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999. Our unemployment rate is now lower than it was before the financial crisis. More of our kids are graduating than ever before. More of our people are insured than ever before. And we are as free from the grip of foreign oil as we've been in almost 30 years. Tonight, for the first time since 9/11, our combat mission in Afghanistan is over. Six years ago, nearly 180,000 American troops served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, fewer than 15,000 remain. And we salute the courage and sacrifice of every man and woman in this 9/11 generation who has served to keep us safe. We are humbled and grateful for your service. America, for all that we have endured, for all the grit and hard work required to come back, for all the tasks that lie ahead, know this: the shadow of crisis has passed, and the state of the union is strong. At this moment, with a growing economy, shrinking deficits, bustling industry, booming energy production, we have risen from recession freer to write our own future than any other nation on earth. It's now up to us to choose who we want to be over the next 15 years and for decades to come. Will we accept an economy where only a few of us do spectacularly well? Or will we commit ourselves to an economy that generates rising incomes and chances for everyone who makes the effort? Will we approach the world fearful and reactive, dragged into costly conflicts that strain our military and set back our standing? Or will we lead wisely, using all elements of our power to defeat new threats and protect our planet? Will we allow ourselves to be sorted into factions and turned against one another? Or will we recapture the sense of common purpose that has always propelled America forward? In 2 weeks, I will send this Congress a budget filled with ideas that are practical, not partisan. And in the months ahead, I'll crisscross the country making a case for those ideas. So tonight, I want to focus less on a checklist of proposals and focus more on the values at stake in the choices before us. It begins with our economy. 7 years ago, Rebecca and Ben Erler of Minneapolis were newlyweds. She waited tables, he worked construction. Their first child, Jack, was on the way. They were young and in love in America. And it doesn't get much better than that. If only we had known, Rebecca wrote to me last spring, what was about to happen to the housing and construction market. As the crisis worsened, Ben's business dried up. So he took what jobs he could find, even if they kept him on the road for long stretches of time. Rebecca took out student loans and enrolled in community college and retrained for a new career. They sacrificed for each other. And slowly it paid off. They bought their first home. They had a second son, Henry. Rebecca got a better job and then a raise. Ben's back in construction and home for dinner every night. It is amazing, Rebecca wrote, what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. America, Rebecca and Ben's story is our story. They represent the millions who've worked hard and scrimped and sacrificed and retooled. You are the reason that I ran for this office. You are the people I was thinking of 6 years ago today, in the darkest months of the crisis, when I stood on the steps of this Capitol and promised we would rebuild our economy on a new foundation. And it has been your resilience, your effort, that has made it possible for our country to emerge stronger. We believed we could reverse the tide of outsourcing and draw new jobs to our shores. And over the past 5 years, our businesses have created more than 11 million new jobs. We believed we could reduce our dependence on foreign oil and protect our planet. And today, America is #1 in oil and gas. America is #1 in wind power. Every 3 weeks, we bring online as much solar power as we did in all of 2008. And thanks to lower gas prices and higher fuel standards, the typical family this year should save about $750 at the pump. We believed we could prepare our kids for a more competitive world. And today, our younger students have earned the highest math and reading scores on record. Our high school graduation rate has hit an all-time high. More Americans finish college than ever before. We believed that sensible regulations could prevent another crisis, shield families from ruin, and encourage fair competition. Today, we have new tools to stop taxpayer-funded bailouts and a new consumer watchdog to protect us from predatory lending and abusive credit card practices. And in the past year alone, about 10 million uninsured Americans finally gained the security of health coverage. At every step, we were told our goals were misguided or too ambitious, that we would crush jobs and explode deficits. Instead, we've seen the fastest economic growth in over a decade, our deficits cut by 2/3, a stock market that has doubled, and healthcare inflation at its lowest rate in 50 years. This is good news, people. So the verdict is clear. Middle-class economics works. Expanding opportunity works. And these policies will continue to work as long as politics don't get in the way. We can't slow down businesses or put our economy at risk with government shutdowns or fiscal showdowns. We can't put the security of families at risk by taking away their health insurance or unraveling the new rules on Wall Street or refighting past battles on immigration when we've got to fix a broken system. And if a bill comes to my desk that tries to do any of these things, I will veto it. It will have earned my veto. Today, thanks to a growing economy, the recovery is touching more and more lives. Wages are finally starting to rise again. We know that more small business owners plan to raise their employees' pay than at any time since 2007. But here's the thing. Those of us here tonight, we need to set our sights higher than just making sure government doesn't screw things up. The government doesn't halt the progress we're making. We need to do more than just do no harm. Tonight, together, let's do more to restore the link between hard work and growing opportunity for every American. Because families like Rebecca's still need our help. She and Ben are working as hard as ever, but they've had to forego vacations and a new car so that they can pay off student loans and save for retirement. Friday night pizza, that's a big splurge. Basic child care for Jack and Henry costs more than their mortgage and almost as much as a year at the University of Minnesota. Like millions of hardworking Americans, Rebecca isn't asking for a handout, but she is asking that we look for more ways to help families get ahead. And in fact, at every moment of economic change throughout our history, this country has taken bold action to adapt to new circumstances and to make sure everyone gets a fair shot. We set up worker protections, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, to protect ourselves from the harshest adversity. We gave our citizens schools and colleges, infrastructure, and the internet, tools they needed to go as far as their efforts and their dreams will take them. That's what middle-class economics is. The idea that this country does best when everyone gets their fair shot. Everyone does their fair share. Everyone plays by the same set of rules. We don't just want everyone to share in America's success, we want everyone to contribute to our success. So what does middle-class economics require in our time? First, middle-class economics means helping working families feel more secure in a world of constant change. It means helping folks afford childcare, college, health care, a home, retirement. And my budget will address each of these issues, lowering the taxes of working families and putting thousands of dollars back into their pockets each year. Here's one example. During World War II, when men like my grandfather went off to war, having women like my grandmother in the workforce was a national security priority. So this country provided universal child care. In today's economy, when having both parents in the workforce is an economic necessity for many families, We need affordable, high-quality child care more than ever. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So it's time we stop treating child care as a side issue or as a women's issue and treat it like the national economic priority that it is for all of us. And that's why my plan will make quality child care more available and more affordable for every middle-class and low-income family with young children in America by creating more slots and a new tax cut of up to $3,000 per child per year. Here's another example. Today, we are the only advanced country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick leave or paid maternity leave to our workers. 43 million workers have no paid sick leave. 43 million. Think about that. And that forces too many parents to make the gut-wrenching choice between a paycheck and a sick kid at home. So I'll be taking new action to help states adopt paid leave laws of their own. And since paid sick leave won where it was on the ballot last November, let's put it to a vote right here in Washington. Send me a bill that gives every worker in America the opportunity to earn 7 days of paid sick leave. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Of course, nothing helps families make ends meet like higher wages. That's why this Congress still needs to pass a law that makes sure a woman is paid the same as a man for doing the same work. It's 2015. It's time. We still need to make sure employees get the overtime they've earned. And everyone in this Congress who still refuses to raise the minimum wage, I say this: if you truly believe you could work full-time and support a family on less than $15,000 a year, try it. If not, vote to give millions of the hardest working people in America a raise. Now, these ideas won't make everybody rich, won't relieve every hardship. That's not the job of government. To give working families a fair shot, we still need more employers to see beyond next quarter's earnings and recognize that investing in their workforce is in their company's long-term interest. We still need laws that strengthen rather than weaken unions and give American workers a voice. But you know, things like child care and sick leave and equal pay, things like lower mortgage premiums and a higher minimum wage, these ideas will make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions of families. That's a fact. And that's what all of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, were sent here to do. And second, to make sure folks keep earning higher wages down the road, we have to do more to help Americans upgrade their skills. You know, America thrived in the 20th century because we made high school free, sent a generation of GIs to college, trained the best workforce in the world. We were ahead of the curve. But other countries caught on. And in a 21st century economy that rewards knowledge like never before, we need to up our game. We need to do more. By the end of this decade, 2 in 3 job openings will require some higher education. 2 in 3. And yet we still live in a country where too many bright, striving Americans are priced out of the education they need. It's not fair to them, and it's sure not smart for our future. And that's why I'm sending this Congress a bold new plan to lower the cost of community college to zero. Keep in mind, 40% of our college students choose community college. Some are young and starting out. Some are older and looking for a better job. Some are veterans and single parents trying to transition back into the job market. Whoever you are, this plan is your chance to graduate ready for the new economy without a load of debt. Understand, you've got to earn it. You've got to keep your grades up and graduate on time. Tennessee, a state with Republican leadership, and Chicago, a city with Democratic leadership, are showing that free community college is possible. I want to spread that idea all across America so that 2 years of college becomes as free and universal in America as high school is today. Let's stay ahead of the curve. And I want to work with this Congress to make sure those already burdened with student loans can reduce their monthly payments so that student debt doesn't derail anyone's dreams. Thanks to Vice President Biden's great work to update our job training system, we're connecting community colleges with local employers to train workers to fill high-paying jobs like coding and nursing and robotics. Tonight, I'm also asking more businesses to follow the lead of companies like CVS and UPS and offer more educational benefits and paid apprenticeships, opportunities that give workers the chance to earn higher-paying jobs even if they don't have a higher education. And as a new generation of veterans comes home, we owe them every opportunity to live the American dream they helped defend. Already, we've made strides towards ensuring that every veteran has access to the highest quality care. We're slashing the backlog that had too many veterans waiting years to get the benefits they need. And we're making it easier for vets to translate their training and experience into civilian jobs. And joining forces, the national campaign launched by Michelle and Jill Biden. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jill. Has helped nearly 700,000 veterans and military spouses get a new job. So to every CEO in America, let me repeat, if you want somebody who's going to get the job done and done right, hire a veteran. Finally, as we better train our workers, we need the new economy to keep churning out high-wage jobs for our workers to fill. Since 2010, America has put more people back to work than Europe, Japan, and all advanced economies combined. Our manufacturers have added almost 800,000 new jobs. Some of our bedrock sectors, like our auto industry, are booming. But there are also millions of Americans who work in jobs that didn't even exist 10 or 20 years ago. Jobs at companies like Google and eBay and Tesla. So no one knows for certain which industries will generate the jobs of the future. But we do know we want them here in America. We know that. And that's why the third part of middle-class economics is all about building the most competitive economy anywhere, the place where businesses want to locate and hire. 21st century businesses need 21st century infrastructure, modern ports and stronger bridges, faster trains, and the fastest internet. Democrats and Republicans used to agree on this. So let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline. Let's pass a bipartisan infrastructure plan that could create more than 30 times as many jobs per year and make this country stronger for decades to come. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. 21st century businesses, including small businesses, need to sell more American products overseas. Today, our businesses export more than ever, and exporters tend to pay their workers higher wages. But as we speak, China wants to write the rules for the world's fastest growing region. That would put our workers and our businesses at a disadvantage. Why would we let that happen? We should write those rules. We should level the playing field. That's why I'm asking both parties to give me trade promotion authority to protect American workers with strong new trade deals from Asia to Europe that aren't just free, but are also fair. It's the right thing to do. Look, I'm the first one to admit that past trade deals haven't always lived up to the hype. And that's why we've gone after countries that break the rules at our expense. But 95% of the world's customers live outside our borders. We can't close ourselves off from those opportunities. More than half of manufacturing executives have said they're actively looking to bring jobs back from China. So let's give them one more reason to get it done. 21st century businesses will rely on American science and technology, research and development. I want the country that eliminated polio and mapped the human genome to lead a new era of medicine, one that delivers the right treatment at the right time. In some patients with cystic fibrosis, this approach has reversed a disease once thought unstoppable. So tonight I'm launching a new precision medicine initiative to bring us closer to curing diseases like cancer and diabetes, and to give all of us access to the personalized information we need to keep ourselves and our families healthier. We can do this. I intend to protect a free and open internet, extend its reach to every classroom and every community, and help folks build the fastest networks so that the next generation of digital innovators and entrepreneurs have the platform to keep reshaping our world. I want Americans to win the race for the kinds of discoveries that unleash new jobs, converting sunlight into liquid fuel, creating revolutionary prosthetics so that a veteran who gave his arms for his country can play catch with his kids again, pushing out into the solar system, not just to visit, but to stay. Last month, we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. And in 2 months, to prepare us for those missions, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. So good luck, Captain. Make sure to Instagram it. We're proud of it. Now, the truth is, when it comes to issues like infrastructure and basic research, I know there's bipartisan support in this chamber. Members of both parties have told me so. Where we too often run onto the rocks is how to pay for these investments. As Americans, we don't mind paying our fair share of taxes as long as everybody else does too. But for far too long, lobbyists have rigged the tax code with loopholes that let some corporations pay nothing while others pay full freight. They've riddled it with giveaways that the super rich don't need while denying a break to middle-class families who do. This year we have an opportunity to change that. Let's close loopholes so we stop rewarding companies that keep profits abroad and reward those that invest here in America. Let's use those savings to rebuild our infrastructure and to make it more attractive for companies to bring jobs home. Let's simplify the system and let a small business owner file based on her actual bank statement instead of the number of accountants she can afford. And let's close the loopholes that lead to inequality by allowing the top 1% to avoid paying taxes on their accumulated wealth. We can use that money to help more families pay for child care and send their kids to college. We need a tax code that truly helps working Americans trying to get a leg up in the new economy, and we can achieve that together. We can achieve it together. Helping hardworking families make ends meet. Giving them the tools they need for good-paying jobs in this new economy. Maintaining the conditions of growth and competitiveness. This is where America needs to go. I believe it's where the American people want to go. It'll make our economy stronger a year from now, 15 years from now, and deep into the century ahead. Of course, if there's one thing this new century has taught us, is that we cannot separate our work here at home from challenges beyond our shores. My first duty as Commander-in-Chief is to defend the United States of America. In doing so, the question is not whether America leads in the world, but how. When we make rash decisions, reacting to the headlines instead of using our heads, when the first response to a challenge is to send in our military, then we risk getting drawn into unnecessary conflicts and neglect the broader strategy we need for a safer, more prosperous world. That's what our enemies want us to do. I believe in a smarter kind of American leadership. We lead best when we combine military power with strong diplomacy, when we leverage our power with coalition building, when we don't let our fears blind us to the opportunities that this new century presents. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And around the globe, it is making a difference. First, we stand united with people around the world who've been targeted by terrorists, from a school in Pakistan to the streets of Paris. We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks, and we reserve the right to act unilaterally, as we have done relentlessly since I took office, to take out terrorists who pose a direct threat to us and our allies. At the same time, we've learned some costly lessons over the last 13 years. Instead of Americans patrolling the valleys of Afghanistan, we've trained their security forces, who've now taken the lead. And we've honored our troops' sacrifice by supporting that country's first democratic transition. Instead of sending large ground forces overseas, we're partnering with nations from South Asia to North Africa to deny safe haven to terrorists who threaten America. In Iraq and Syria, American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance. Instead of getting dragged into another ground war in the Middle East, we are leading a broad coalition, including Arab nations, to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group. We're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort. and assisting people everywhere who stand up to the bankrupt ideology of violent extremism. Now, this effort will take time. It will require focus. But we will succeed. And tonight, I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority. Second, we're demonstrating the power of American strength and diplomacy. We're upholding the principle that bigger nations can't bully the small by opposing Russian aggression and supporting Ukraine's democracy and reassuring our NATO allies. Last year, as we were doing the hard work of imposing sanctions, along with our allies, as we were reinforcing our presence with the frontline states, Mr. Putin's aggression, it was suggested, was a masterful display of strategy and strength. That's what I heard from some folks. Well, today, it is America that stands strong and united with our allies, while Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters. That's how America leads, not with bluster, but with persistent, steady resolve. You know, in Cuba, we are ending a policy that was long past its expiration date. When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. And our shift in Cuba policy has the potential to end a legacy of mistrust in our hemisphere. It removes a phony excuse for restrictions in Cuba, stands up for democratic values, and extends the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. And this year, Congress should begin the work of ending the embargo. You know, as His Holiness Pope Francis has said, diplomacy is the work of small steps. These small steps have added up to new hope for the future in Cuba. And after years in prison, we are overjoyed that Alan Gross is back where he belongs. Welcome home, Alan. We're glad you're here. Our diplomacy is at work with respect to Iran, where for the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress of its nuclear program and reduced its stockpile of nuclear material. Between now and this spring, we have a chance to negotiate a comprehensive agreement that prevents a nuclear-armed Iran, secures America and our allies, including Israel, while avoiding yet another Middle East conflict. There are no guarantees that negotiations will succeed. And I keep all options on the table to prevent a nuclear Iran. But new sanctions passed by this Congress at this moment in time will all but guarantee that diplomacy fails, alienating America from its allies, making it harder to maintain sanctions, and ensuring that Iran starts up its nuclear program again. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I will veto any new sanctions bill that threatens to undo this progress. The American people expect us only to go to war as a last resort. And I intend to stay true to that wisdom. Third, we're looking beyond the issues that have consumed us in the past to shape the coming century. No foreign nation, no hacker should be able to shut down our networks, steal our trade secrets, or invade the privacy of American families, especially our kids. So we're making sure our government integrates intelligence to combat cyber threats just as we have done to combat terrorism. And tonight I urge this Congress to finally pass the legislation we need to better meet the evolving threat of cyber attacks, combat identity theft, and protect our children's information. That should be a bipartisan effort. You know, if we don't act, we'll leave our nation and our economy vulnerable. If we do, we can continue to protect the technologies that have unleashed untold opportunities for people around the globe. In West Africa, our troops, our scientists, our doctors, our nurses, our healthcare workers are rolling back Ebola, saving countless lives and stopping the spread of disease. I could not be prouder of them. And I thank this Congress for your bipartisan support of their efforts. But the job is not yet done, and the world needs to use this lesson to build a more effective global effort to prevent the spread of future pandemics, invest in smart development, and eradicate extreme poverty. In the Asia-Pacific, we are modernizing alliances while making sure that other nations play by the rules in how they trade, how they resolve maritime disputes, how they participate in meeting common international challenges like nonproliferation and disaster relief. And no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. – 2014 was the planet's warmest year on record. Now, one year doesn't make a trend, but this does. 14 of the 15 warmest years on record have all fallen in the first 15 years of this century. I've heard some folks try to dodge the evidence by saying they're not scientists, that we don't have enough information to act. Well, I'm not a scientist either. But you know what? I know a lot of really good scientists at NASA and at NOAA and at our major universities. And the best scientists in the world are all telling us that our activities are changing the climate. And if we don't act forcefully, we'll continue to see rising oceans, longer, hotter heat waves, dangerous droughts and floods, and massive disruptions that can trigger greater migration and conflict and hunger around the globe. The Pentagon says that climate change poses immediate risks to our national security. We should act like it. And that's why over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we've set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. And that's why I will not let this Congress endanger the health of our children by turning back the clock on our efforts. I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got. And there's one last pillar of our leadership, and that's the example of our values. As Americans, we respect human dignity even when we're threatened, which is why I have prohibited torture and worked to make sure our use of new technology like drones is properly constrained. It's why we speak out against the deplorable anti-Semitism that has resurfaced in certain parts of the world. It's why we continue to reject offensive stereotypes of Muslims the vast majority of whom share our commitment to peace. That's why we defend free speech and advocate for political prisoners and condemn the persecution of women or religious minorities or people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We do these things not only because they are the right thing to do, but because ultimately they will make us safer. As Americans, we have a profound commitment to justice. So it makes no sense to spend $3 million per prisoner to keep open a prison that the world condemns and terrorists use to recruit. Since I've been president, we've worked responsibly to cut the population of Gitmo in half. Now it is time to finish the job, and I will not relent in my determination to shut it down. It is not who we are. It's time to close Gitmo. As Americans, we cherish our civil liberties, and we need to uphold that commitment if we want maximum cooperation from other countries and industry in our fight against terrorist networks. So while some have moved on from the debates over our surveillance, I have not. As promised, our intelligence agencies have worked hard with the recommendations of privacy advocates to increase transparency and build more safeguards against potential abuse. And next month, we'll issue a report on how we're keeping our promise to keep our country safe while strengthening privacy. Looking to the future instead of the past. Making sure we match our power with diplomacy and use force wisely. Building coalitions to meet new challenges and opportunities. Leading always with the example of our values. That's what makes us exceptional. That's what keeps us strong. That's why we have to keep striving to hold ourselves to the highest of standards, our own. You know, just over a decade ago, I gave a speech in Boston where I said there wasn't a liberal America or a conservative America, a black America or a white America, but a United States of America. I said this because I had seen it in my own life, in a nation that gave someone like me a chance. Because I grew up in Hawaii, a melting pot of races and customs. Because I made Illinois my home. A state of small towns, rich farmland, one of the world's great cities, a microcosm of the country where Democrats and Republicans and independents, good people of every ethnicity and every faith, share certain bedrock values. Over the past 6 years, the pundits have pointed out more than once that my presidency hasn't delivered on this vision. How ironic, they say, that our politics seems more divided than ever. It's held up as proof, not just of my own flaws, of which there are many, but also as proof that the vision itself is misguided, naive, that there are too many people in this town who actually benefit from partisanship and gridlock for us to ever do anything about it. I know how tempting such cynicism may be, but I still think the cynics are wrong. I still believe that we are one people. I still believe that together we can do great things, even when the odds are long. I believe this because over and over in my 6 years in office, I have seen America at its best. I've seen the hopeful faces of young graduates from New York to California, and our newest officers at West Point, Annapolis, Colorado Springs, New London. I've mourned with grieving families in Tucson, in Newtown, in Boston, in West Texas, in West Virginia. I've watched Americans beat back adversity from the Gulf Coast to the Great Plains, from Midwest assembly lines to the mid-Atlantic seaboard. I've seen something like gay marriage go from a wedge issue used to drive us apart to a story of freedom across our country, a civil right now legal in states that 7 in 10 Americans call home. So I know the good and optimistic and big-hearted generosity of the American people, who every day live the idea that we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. And I know they expect those of us who serve here to set a better example. So the question for those of us here tonight is how we, all of us, can better reflect America's hopes. I've served in Congress with many of you. I know many of you well. There are a lot of good people here on both sides of the aisle. And many of you have told me that this isn't what you signed up for. Arguing past each other on cable shows, the constant fundraising, always looking over your shoulder at how the base will react to every decision. Imagine if we broke out of these tired old patterns. Imagine if we did something different. Understand, a better politics isn't one where Democrats abandon their agenda or Republicans simply embrace mine. A better politics is one where we appeal to each other's basic decency instead of our basest fears. A better politics is one where we debate without demonizing each other, where we talk issues and values and principles and facts rather than gotcha moments or trivial gaffes or fake controversies that have nothing to do with people's daily lives. A better politics is one where we spend less time drowning in dark money for ads that pull us into the gutter and spend more time lifting young people up with a sense of purpose and possibility, asking them to join in the great mission of building America. If we're going to have arguments, let's have arguments, but let's make them debates worthy of this body and worthy of this country. We still may not agree on a woman's right to choose, but surely we can agree it's a good thing that teen pregnancies and abortions are nearing all-time lows and that every woman should have access to the health care that she needs. Yes, passions still fly on immigration, but surely we can all see something of ourselves in the striving young student and agree that no one benefits when a hardworking mom is snatched from her child, and then it's possible to shape a law that upholds our tradition as a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats about that. That's something that we can share. We may go at it in campaign season, but surely we can agree that the right to vote is sacred, that it's being denied to too many, and that on this 50th anniversary of the Great March from Selma to Montgomery and the passage of the Voting Rights Act, we can come together, Democrats and Republicans, to make voting easier for every single American. We may have different takes on the events of Ferguson and New York, but surely we can understand a father who fears his son can't walk home without being harassed. And surely we can understand the wife who won't rest until the police officer she married walks through the front door at the end of his shift. And surely we can agree that it's a good thing that for the first time in 40 years, the crime rate and the incarceration rate have come down together. And use that as a starting point for Democrats and Republicans, community leaders and law enforcement to reform America's criminal justice system so that it protects and serves All of us. That's a better politics. That's how we start rebuilding trust. That's how we move this country forward. That's what the American people want. And that's what they deserve. I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them. My only agenda for the next 2 years is the same as the one I've had since the day I swore an oath on the steps of this Capitol. To do what I believe is best for America. If you share the broad vision I outlined tonight, I ask you to join me in the work at hand. If you disagree with parts of it, I hope you'll at least work with me where you do agree. And I commit to every Republican here tonight that I will not only seek out your ideas, I will seek to work with you to make this country stronger. Because I want this chamber, I want this city to reflect the truth that for all our blind spots and shortcomings, we are a people with the strength and generosity of spirit to bridge divides, to unite in common effort, to help our neighbors, whether down the street or on the other side of the world. I want our actions to tell every child in every neighborhood, your life matters. And we are committed to improving your life chances, as committed as we are to working on behalf of our own kids. I want future generations to know that we are a people who see our differences as a great gift, that we're a people who value the dignity and worth of every citizen. Man and woman, young and old, black and white, Latino, Asian, immigrant, Native American, gay, straight, Americans with mental illness or physical disability. Everybody matters. I want them to grow up in a country that shows the world what we still know to be true, that we are still more than a collection of red states and blue states, that we are the United States of America. I want them to grow up in a country where a young mom can sit down and write a letter to her president with a story that sums up these past 6 years. It's amazing what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who's made it through some very, very hard times. My fellow Americans, we too are a strong, tight-knit family. We too have made it through some hard times. 15 years into this new century, we have picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and begun again the work of remaking America. We have laid a new foundation. A brighter future is ours to write. Let's begin this new chapter together. And let's start the work right now. Thank you. God bless you. God bless this country we love. Thank you.
Welcome Welcome back to RollCall.com's State of the Union Watch Party. I'm Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor-in-chief, coming to you from the newsroom. We just heard President Obama deliver his State of the Union address. You can read the full text on our website, RollCall.com. You can read analysis of the speech that our White House correspondent Steve Dennis is writing at RollCall.com. Of course, be following us on Twitter. We've got lots of great statistics, including this felt to me like potentially the shortest State of the Union the president has ever given. So we'll have all of those details on our Twitter feed at Roll Call. In a little bit, we'll be going to Shira Center, our politics editor, who will be interviewing members of Congress, the real power players on Capitol Hill, who are going to have a lot of power in determining what's going to happen next after the president has delivered this address. Shira will be live in Statuary Hall. We'll be coming to her. We will be playing you the Republican response. That is from Joni Ernst, a freshman senator, Republican from Iowa, and that will come in just a couple of minutes. So that's all the housekeeping stuff. We want to give a special thanks to Earth Justice, our sponsor. And for now, here I am with senior editor David Hawkins. What did you make of this speech?
I was sort of blown away by what a high wire act he was trying to execute here, where on the one hand, about half the rhetoric was the traditional reach across the aisle, work with the other side, but then almost immediately he pivots to these pokes at the Republicans, including at least two that I noticed that were not in the text as we were handed before the speech started. One there at the very end where he said, "I have no more campaigns to run." The Republicans started clapping, and he said, "That's because I won both of them." And there was an earlier one where he outlined his economic good news, and the Republicans also sat on their hands, and he said, I think something like, "Remember, this is good news, people. You can be clapping." So he's clearly betraying his frustration with the Republicans who now run Congress, even as he's making the rhetoric about trying to get something out of them.
And this does matter to them. Mentioned at our pre-broadcast that I was where Shira was last year talking to members in Statuary Hall, and I had several Republicans say to me they didn't like the way he was sort of directly confronting them. That they are a bit fragile, I would say, in their egos in some ways, and they like to be felt like they are partners in achieving something, that they are willing players at the table, even if they've demonstrated no willingness to do that. And so, unfortunately, we end up with this partisanship, as it were. But one thing that you did notice is the president touched on just about everything. We used in our story laundry list, but from climate change to his immigration executive action, Cuba. Is there anything that he left out?
Well, as you and I were mentioning off camera, we didn't initially remember a mention to Keystone, the Keystone pipeline, except he did make a sort of a throwaway line to that and saying our energy policy should be more than just one small pipeline. It touched, yes, it was the classic buffet table. I don't like laundry lists, but it was sort of a buffet table where he laid out at least something for every constituency, almost every cabinet department, every niche voter. They say always at the White House that these speeches are going to be more thematic than punch list, but it always turns out to sound like a punch list, and that's important. That's an important reason why the president did what he did for the previous 2 weeks when he went to these interesting parts of the country and rolled out different headlines on different days, so that we wouldn't just think it was a punch list. We'd have headlines to write. I don't know what tomorrow's headline is, except maybe asking for the use of force against ISIS.
Right. In that headline in just a moment. For now, we are going to turn to Shira Center, our politics editor, who is live in Statuary Hall with Greg Walden, who is a Republican from Oregon.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I have with me here right now Congressman Greg Walden, also the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee and a Republican from Oregon. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Delighted to be with you tonight.
Now, the president, towards the end of his speech, struck a very bipartisan tone, even going back to some of the themes of his famous speech at the 2004 convention. Do you buy it?
Well, we welcome it. And I think he means it, except that the prior 2/3 of his speech was all about how he was going to go his own way and veto anything we do. Look, the American people sent a clear and distinct message in the November elections. He said, my policies are on the ballot even if I'm not. The American people rejected it. And so I think they're looking for something different out of the president than what we heard tonight. I think they want us all to get together and figure out how to build new jobs, better paying jobs in America, get people back to work. I'm sure he shares that, but I don't think he knows how to do that.
Did you hear anything specific in the president's speech that you could see as an area for compromise with House Republicans?
Well, we'll see how these things play out. Obviously, and those of us who had young families at one point understand the burden of trying to do child care, and my wife and I both worked in our small business at the same time and tried to raise our son as well. I understand those concerns parents have. And I think that, where we can make life better for people, we're all in together on that. Now, it's interesting that we talk about the lower gas prices because his policies would drive up the price of fuel. And in fact, he wants higher taxes on gasoline. And so, there's sort of this disconnect between his policies and the reality of a vibrant economy. And those of us who have actually been in small business, like a lot of Americans are, or live in small towns like I do, I think they see this disconnect between what he says he's going to do and really how the economy works. I don't think he gets how the economy really works.
Congressman, I have not seen you since the November elections where you guided House Republicans to a historic majority in the House. Congratulations on that. Did you hear anything in the speech tonight that you might use in a future campaign ad for 2016 to further increase that majority?
I don't know about that. What we're focused on here tonight is where can we find common ground? How do we work together, and how do we get America even a better, stronger place? And so I don't know. With all the campaigns, we're a ways out from that. But I do think that the president didn't hear what the American people's message was in November. Now, I was out there a lot. He's been out there a lot. He said his policies were on the ballot, even though he wasn't. There was a clear referendum election and a rejection. And all I heard tonight was more of what the American people have already said they rejected. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Congressman Walden, for joining us this
Glad
evening.
To be with you tonight.
And I hope you'll come back next year.
Happy to do it.
Christina, back to you at CQ Roll Call Headquarters. Thank you.
Nice interview there with Chairman Walden. It was really interesting to me, David, obviously from a political perspective, Republicans are still going to be campaigning against Barack Obama until they have a presidential nominee.
Right, and many people have already made this point, but it's worth making after the speech, that since the basic prediction would be this is going to be a year not of big legislative compromise. Instead, it's going to be a year of positioning for 2016. The president still is technically the leader of the Democratic Party until someone else gets nominated or emerges as the next standard bearer and takes his place. So it's up to the president to lay out the themes he'd like to see played out in 2016, and it's up to the Republicans. We'll hear from Senator Ernst in a minute about what themes she'd like the Republicans to be talking about in her home state of Iowa.
Now that's David Hawkins with the cynic's view. I am optimist, and I think that perhaps they have a year to work together, that you really might have until late December until you're defining things. I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, that's
I
what's
like
going
to
to
be
keep us in
optimistic
business.
about it all. We are going to be going back to Shira Center in Statuary Hall in just a moment. We're waiting. Timing, of course, is tricky because the Republican address is supposed to start 5 minutes after the president's address. We want to make sure you see that in full. But now we're going to go back to Shira Center. Roll Call's politics editor. She's in Statuary Hall with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, a freshman who was married to, is still married to John Dingell, a former congressman who retired, and she now is holding his seat from Michigan.
Thank you so much, Christina. As you mentioned, I'm here with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. You have been to this speech before, correct? But this is your first time on the floor. What was that experience like?
Well, it was very great to be there with my colleagues on the floor. It does give you a different feel when you're down there, and you take it very seriously. It's a message to the country about the State of the Union. So for me, it was a very memorable night.
Do you agree with the president that the State of the Union is strong economically?
I believe that we are growing stronger. I think the focus of his speech tonight was very important, which is that we need to support the middle class and grow the middle class. Too many people in my district, for instance, have found stagnant wages over the last few years, while consumer prices have been going up, so they haven't felt the growth that we've seen in some of the numbers. So we do need to try to help the middle class. Not only that, we've got to grow the middle class. The fastest way for us to reduce our budget is to increase revenue, to increase taxes. So I thought that his speech was very good tonight. I think that his focus is in the right area, and I particularly like the way that he wrapped it up because I do think we're all Americans, and that's what we need to remember more, what unites us than divides us.
Perhaps some of the things he mentioned in the speech, or maybe there's something you're already working on in Congress in terms of bipartisanship. Is there any specific issue you really see yourself working across the aisle in the next few months?
Well, I see myself working on a lot of issues across the aisle. Manufacturing, how we grow manufacturing in this country, creating jobs. I think business and labor need to work together to bring more manufacturing to this country. So that'll be an area I'm already focused on and will.
All right. And a final question for you, Congresswoman Dingell. The president mentioned climate change as part of his speech, obviously. What's your reaction to his call to to put a greater emphasis on legislation confronting climate change?
Well, I think that one of the most important pieces of environmental regulation that we saw of this generation was when you brought agreement between the car companies, labor, at the White House, in the administration, environmentalist groups, bringing everybody together on strong fuel economy standards. I think if we can bring everybody to the table, talk through the issues, have everyone understand what the challenges are, have the same goals, we can do that in other areas.
I bet you're going to try and make sure you're at that table too, right?
Well, I'm going to work hard for the future of this country. Yes, that's true.
All right. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Dingell. I hope you'll join us again next year.
Thank you.
Christina, back to you at Roll Call Studio.
Interesting hearing somebody from Michigan, a state that has been hurt far more in the economy over the last few years than other states. But the president did talk about what he had done with the auto industry. That's another thing that he tried to champion. So it's just interesting to hear her take. She seemed pretty pleased with what the president had to say.
She did, and she's got obviously a unique challenge. I think I wrote about a year ago. She is actually the first person to succeed a spouse in Congress while that spouse was still living. And she's got her own path to make. She seems to be trying to position herself as a little bit more purple, a little bit more centrist than her husband, but different from her husband on some issues where he crossed the line. The environment, most notably gun control. Interesting to see how she makes her way in the next couple of months.
Just tuning again at rollcall.com. We've got all kinds of analysis. We've got the speech text. We're going to be posting video highlights of the speech tomorrow. You should be following our Twitter feed at Roll Call. I'm Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor-in-chief, and I'm here with David Hawkins, our senior editor, and Stephen Dennis, our White House correspondent. As soon as he's done with that story we need him to file for tomorrow's paper, we'll be getting his analysis as well. And Shira Center has a whole list of members of Congress she's going to be talking with over the next hour and a half. So stick with us. This is really great to have you joining us and be engaging with us here at rollcall.com. All of this is made possible, I have to point out, by our generous sponsors, Earth Justice. So thanks very much. So one thing that stood out to me, and this is maybe a little inside baseball, but I know that our viewers are insiders, so they've probably noticed this, is sort of all of the different delivery methods for this speech. So, for example, the president did a sort of pre-speech on YouTube, and the White House opened up, tell us what you'd like to see in the speech. They even, for the first time in releasing the remarks, gave us a little preamble saying there's a ritual for State of the Union, saying usually before the address they send it embargoed to members of the press, that's us, so we can then go around and get reaction and write our stories before the president even begins speaking. And so they said, instead of doing that, we are going to give it to everyone at once. And you can even see it's almost not a complete copy of the speech. There's a few different fonts.
Right.
It's an interesting dynamic, and as we're waiting for the Republican response to start on their YouTube page, which they've been using all day to promote this, there's a live stream of people commenting, and some of the comments are not safe for work, certainly not safe for broadcast, and you realize that it really is a completely open forum. Anyone can weigh in.
I think that's right. This was fascinating to see that the White House made this point, which I'd never really stopped to think about because I've been covering the State of the Union as sort of an insider for the last 25 years, that up until, I guess, this year, the only way the public would read the text is we would get it sent to us, and then we would turn around and hit the forward button to send to everybody else that we had. And it seems kind of obvious that the White House would just put it out unfiltered, just as they have in all these other ways, right? They leak things on Vine. They've talked about I think the first interview he's giving after the State of the Union is to some people from YouTube. There were sort of YouTube heroes or YouTube stars.
Work policy that he announced in the speech, he actually previewed those on LinkedIn.
Right.
So they're trying to be as innovative as possible. And I covered Barack Obama as a candidate from the very beginning. First covered him as a senator, as a reporter covering Congress, and then went on the campaign trail with him. And they were all about bypassing the media filter.
Right.
Why do that when you can go straight to the source? And now everyone has really imitated that. So we might go back to Shira Center in a little bit, but we are ready for Shira. Sorry, we've got lots of multiple windows telling us what's happening. So Tom Cole is there with Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor in Statuary Hall.
Thank you so much, Christina. As you said, I'm here with Congressman Tom Cole, a Republican from Oklahoma. Thank you so much for joining our live cast this evening. So you were sitting amongst your colleagues, House Republicans. What would you say their general reaction was, perhaps whispering between the seats?
Well, certainly a little bit of skepticism. Look, the president offered some places where we can cooperate, but he took some pretty intense shots as well and laid out some areas that he knew coming in we certainly weren't going to agree with. And so I think probably it's very much a Missouri attitude. It's show me. Let's see if you're serious about working together. We haven't seen much of that since the election. We've seen one gauntlet after another thrown down in front of Republicans. But if he's serious about infrastructure, certainly we will work with him on trade, where he got a much better response on the Republican side than the Democratic side. Frankly, I was very intrigued by his focus on precision medicine. I chair the Labor Aid Subcommittee, was actually out at the NIH today meeting with them about that very topic. That's certainly an area that we can work together. Look, disease doesn't distinguish between Republicans and Democrats, so we want to find some areas that we can get some things done, but we know there's going to be some pretty intense differences. One other area that I think...
Oh, Congressman Cole, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Senator Joni Ernst is about to go on right about now. I know, I'm sure you wish her all the luck in the world.
I do.
It's a tough
I know
job.
she'll knock it out of the park.
Well, thank you so much.
It's important to hear a great country. We appreciate the president sharing his. Tonight, though, rather than respond to a speech, I'd like to talk about your priorities. I'd like to have a conversation about the new Republican Congress you just elected and how we plan to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We heard the message you sent in November, loud and clear, and now we're getting to work to change the direction Washington has been taking our country. The new Republican Congress also understands how difficult these past 6 years have been. For many of us, the sting of the economy and the frustration with Washington's dysfunction weren't things we had to read about. We felt them every day. We felt them in Red Oak, the little town in southwestern Iowa where I grew up and am still proud to call home today. As a young girl, I plowed the fields of our family farm. I worked construction with my dad. To save for college, I worked the morning biscuit line at Hardee's. We were raised to live simply, not to waste. It was a lesson my mother taught me every rainy morning. You see, growing up, I had only one good pair of shoes. So on rainy school days, my mom would slip plastic bread bags over them to keep them dry. But I was never embarrassed because the school bus would be filled with rows and rows of young Iowans with bread bags slipped over their feet. Our parents may not have had much, but they worked hard for what they did have. These days, though, many families feel like they're working harder and harder with less and less to show for it, not just in Red Oak, but across the country. We see our neighbors agonize over stagnant wages and lost jobs. We see the hurt caused by canceled health care plans and higher monthly insurance bills. We see too many moms and dads put their own dreams on hold while growing more fearful about the kind of future they'll be able to leave to their children. Americans have been hurting But when we demanded solutions too often, Washington responded with the same stale mindset that led to failed policies like Obamacare. It's a mindset that gave us political talking points, not serious solutions. That's why the new Republican majority you elected started by reforming Congress to make it function again. And now we're working hard to pass the kind of serious job creation ideas you deserve. One you've probably heard about is the Keystone Jobs Bill. President Obama has been delaying this bipartisan infrastructure project for years, even though many members of his party, unions, and a strong majority of Americans support it. The president's own State Department has said Keystone's construction could support thousands of jobs and pump billions into our economy, and do it with minimal environmental impact. We worked with Democrats to pass this bill through the House. We're doing the same now in the Senate. President Obama will soon have a decision to make. Will he sign the bill or block good American jobs? There's a lot we can achieve if we work together. Let's tear down trade barriers in places like Europe and the Pacific. Let's sell more of what we make and grow in America over there so we can boost manufacturing wages and jobs right here at home. Let's simplify America's outdated and loophole-ridden tax code. Republicans think tax filing should be easier for you, not just the well-connected. So let's iron out loopholes to lower rates and create jobs, not pay for more government spending. The president has already expressed some support for these kinds of ideas. We're calling on him now to cooperate to pass them. You'll see a lot of serious work in this new Congress. Some of it will occur where I stand tonight, in the Armed Services Committee room. This is where I'll join committee colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to discuss ways to support our exceptional military and its mission. This is where we'll debate strategies to confront terrorism and the threats posed by Al-Qaeda, ISIL, and those radicalized by them. We know threats like these can't just be wished away. We've been reminded of terrorism's reach, both at home and abroad, most recently in France and Nigeria, but also in places like Canada and Australia. Our hearts go out to all the innocent victims of terrorism and their loved ones. We can only imagine the depth of their grief. For 2 decades, I've proudly worn our nation's uniform, today as a lieutenant colonel in the Iowa Army National Guard. While deployed overseas with some of America's finest men and women, I've seen just how dangerous these kinds of threats can be. The forces of violence and oppression don't care about the innocent. We need a comprehensive plan to defeat them. We must also honor America's veterans. These men and women have sacrificed so much in defense of our freedoms and our way of life. They deserve nothing less than the benefits they were promised and a quality of care we can all be proud of. These are important issues the new Congress plans to address. We'll also keep fighting to repeal and replace a health care law that's hurt so many hardworking families. We'll work to correct executive overreach. We'll propose ideas that aim to cut wasteful spending and balance the budget with meaningful reforms, not higher taxes like the president has proposed. We'll advance solutions to prevent the kind of cyber attacks we've seen recently. We'll work to confront Iran's nuclear ambitions. And we'll defend life because protecting our most vulnerable is an important measure of any society. Congress is back to work on your behalf, ready to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We know America faces big challenges, but history has shown there's nothing our nation and our people can't accomplish. Just look at my parents and grandparents. They had very little to call their own except the sweat on their brow and the dirt on their hands. But they worked, they sacrificed, and they dreamed big dreams for their children and grandchildren. And because they did, an ordinary Iowan like me has had some truly extraordinary opportunities, because they showed me that you don't need to come from wealth or privilege to make a difference. You just need the freedom to dream big and a whole lot of hard work. The new Republican Congress you elected is working to make Washington understand that too. And with a little cooperation from the president, we can get Washington working again. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. May God bless this great country of ours, the brave Americans serving in uniform on our behalf, and you, the hardworking men and women who make the United States of America the greatest nation the world has ever known.
Welcome back. I'm Christina Bellantoni, Editor-in-Chief of Roll Call, coming to you from the Roll Call newsroom. Thank you very much for joining our State of the Union Watch Party, sponsored by Earth Justice. I am joined here by Senior Editor David Hawkins, and we will be hearing from Shira Center, who has been interviewing members of Congress in Statuary Hall tonight, getting their reaction to the speech. Speaking of reaction to the speech, we have a very cool social media project that we're doing for the second year in a row. So too in 3 words, that's the hashtag. We coined this last year, by the way. I know there's all kinds of hashtags out there on other mediums, but we started this, and the idea is to get members of Congress to tell us in their own 3 words, just a gut reaction, because so frequently our inboxes are filled with canned statements, most of which were prepared ahead of the speech. They might add in a new line or something, and they don't tell us a whole lot. But your gut reaction in 3 words is actually fairly helpful, which of course I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, what's mine?
What are your 3 words, David?
They're long words. Confrontation while cooperating.
Oh, nice. We actually were just trying out our headline for tomorrow's front page of Roll Call, and confrontation and conciliation were some of the words we rejected because they're too long.
Right.
Little bit of inside the newsroom for you.
But that, right, that seems to be it. It's a push. It's the push me, pull you of where Obama's trying to take things.
Sure is. So that speech from Joni Ernst was extraordinary. It was so personal. You've
Right.
seen this happen more and more. So frequently for many years, it was the party line. It was probably Rubio told us a little bit about how he grew up, the fact that he and his wife are still paying off student loans, which had actually been a popular line for Barack Obama as a candidate. Here, now we have Joni Ernst's entire life story and family photos.
Little pictures of her as a girl.
And I mean, it's interesting to me that the Republican Party would want to use these precious minutes to essentially allow one of their potentially, I guess we can call her a rising star, because she took a seat away from the Democrats, so that makes her a rising star, but she's only been in Congress for a couple of weeks, to essentially allow her the opportunity to introduce herself to the country like a national figure would, and to make herself the sort of embodiment of how the Republicans see the American dream, which is it's an interesting use of the time.
Showcasing Republicans are just like everybody else, and here's one
Right.
representative of that.
Right, and with hard work.
Hard work and determination and all those American verities, she's worked her way up to be in the Senate.
Now, obviously, most of the speech also was written ahead of time. They might have tweaked it slightly. It actually started much later than they said, but everything in here you could have written ahead of time, knowing sort of what President Barack Obama had projected that he would include in his speech. The line about Keystone was probably the most confrontational. I mean, she said, you've heard about this Keystone Jobs Bill, very particular language there. We've been covering this Keystone debate, both at Roll Call and through our partners covering policy at CQ.com, which you should absolutely be following at CQ Now to get the latest on all the policy details. We're focused on the politics. They've got all the policy. But this Keystone bill, they've been debating amendments all day today. In fact, they had a few votes on amendments today. And this is a real test for not just Congress and President Obama, but Republicans and Republicans.
Right. It is a test. I think it's more of a test for the Republicans and the president. We noticed before the break that the president only made kind of passing reference to Keystone. I still think that there's a chance that he will, in the end, sign the Keystone bill. Even though he said he'll veto it, I still think that that if some other things that Democrats like are added to the Keystone bill, that there's a chance that he will surprise everybody and actually sign this thing. But only because I think he wants it behind him. He doesn't want the word veto to be the first thing out of the bag. He's going to have to veto some other things, and maybe he'll figure out a way to sign this one.
You know, the Republicans are framing it as, you know, President Obama has a decision to make. Will he sign the bill or will he block good American jobs?
Right.
And the opponent line to this, and I won't even say Democratic line because there are Democrats who support authorizing this pipeline, but the opponent line to this is that, well, it would only create 35 jobs.
Right.
And then you hear other arguments that it's thousands of jobs. And
Each side says the other side is exaggerating, right? The opponents of the pipeline say the proponents are exaggerating the job creation, and the people who advocate for the pipeline say the opponents are way exaggerating the environmental downside to this. And many experts say both sides are right in criticizing the other side, and that the Keystone has become more a political horse trade than a really big deal on either front.
So something that she didn't mention in her response, but which we expect to hear quite a bit about. We've seen a lot of statements come out already. And the president's changing policy there. I mean, you've seen a lot. How do you feel that is this really a change, and how are Republicans going to address it? Is there anything they can do if they don't agree with his policies?
I think at this point they seem to be backing away. They're not talking about it as the big overreach, as the big presidential overreach that they've said on so many other things.
We're going to go back to Shira Center in Statuary Hall. She is live with Virginia Democrat Dawn Beyer, who won Jim Moran's seat in the election this fall. It's a strongly Democratic district. So we knew that Dawn Beyer was coming to Congress. In fact, David, you wrote a column about that. And we're going to Shira now.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm standing here with Congressman Dawn Beyer from Northern Virginia. Thank you so much for coming on our live cast, and congratulations on your recent election.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. So this was your first time in the State of the Union
It was.
speech?
Every other time's been home watching it on TV.
So what was the experience like?
Well, it's historic. It's fun. I usually don't stand up and sit down at home. But
right.
I did that a lot tonight.
That would be fun, though. That'd be entertaining.
Yeah. And I thought it was a very positive speech. You know, he really laid out a very clear agenda for everything, child care to what he called middle-class economics, sick leave, paid sick leave, and many, many other things. How to make America better the next 15 years. And I think he did it in a very nonpartisan or even bipartisan way, because he kept asking Democrats and Republicans to come together, agree, and work with him.
You know, he did strike many, many words of bipartisanship throughout the first part of his speech. In your short time in Congress so far, do you think that's really achievable in the next year or two?
I sure hope so. You know, at the end, the president said, please don't be cynical. Look at all the progress we've made in the last 6 years. We're the fastest growth in American history, and record low teen pregnancies and abortions, and many other good things. So it may have been tough and a lot of stress, but we've come a long way anyway, and I think we will again.
And do you ever speak with the president, maybe on specific policy issues?
I actually get to go to the White House tomorrow morning.
Oh.
So it's going to be a short night's sleep. We're going to go talk about healthcare and how to bend the healthcare curve down even more.
Wow. Excellent. Well, I'm sure we'll get an update from you after that fact. We'd like it very much so. One more question about the State of the Union speech, if you don't mind. The president mentioned climate change, and he really seemed to make a dig at Republicans who've repeatedly said, I'm not a scientist, I don't understand. What's your reaction to that? And looking around the room, how did you see the House Republican reaction to that?
Well, I think he was trying to say, it is not enough to hide behind I'm not a scientist. Very few of us are scientists, but there are great scientists, and almost every scientist in the world right now says this is a very real phenomenon and we have to react. I think he was trying to bring us back to the facts and bring us back to our responsibility, emphasized by the Pentagon, that we have to do something to make it different in the years to come.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Congressman Byer, again, congratulations on your first term in Congress.
Thank you,
I
Shira.
hope you'll join us again next year.
I sure will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shira.
Back to you, Christina.
Hi, thanks, Shira. That's Shira Center, our politics editor for Roll Call, live in Statuary Hall. That was with Virginia Democratic freshman Dawn Byer. So that was really interesting, actually. Shira broke some news there that Dawn Byer is headed to the White House in the morning for a meeting on health care, and what I think he said was reducing costs and looking at ways to bend the cost curve, which is obviously something that has Republican support, and another potential area of compromise.
And making a bit of a surprise because, to be honest, the president has not had too many meetings with rank and file members, new members, even Democrats. This sort of harkens back to what we were talking about before. His approach avoidance with Congress. Now it sounds like he's willing to do some of the courting of members that he has been kind of uninterested in doing.
And interesting that it would be Dawn Byer that's one of those, given that he was a top fundraiser for the Obama campaign. He was what's known as a bundler, pulling together lots of big money donors for bigger money donations, and then ended up serving as the president's ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. In his, I think both terms actually, he overlapped, and then
was lieutenant governor of Virginia somewhere in between. Right?
Yes, and did not win a race for governor. Shira will be coming up here with Ben Ray Lujan. He is the new chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. She will be live with him in just one moment. We're coming to Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor, in Statuary Hall with Ben Ray Lujan.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. Perfect. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm with Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, the newly elected chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so very much. It's good to be with you tonight.
Now, this was obviously a very important speech. Was there anything you heard tonight that you might use perhaps as fodder for recruitment for candidates in the next few weeks?
Well, I hope that everyone across the country, Democrats, Republicans, Independents alike, were eager and excited to hear the president talk about the importance of an emphasis to the middle class tax cuts, targeting workplace training programs by making college more affordable, community college programs. Community colleges are very important to me back in New Mexico and I'd say all across rural America to working people, and that's what this should all be about. And for me particularly, really took an interest with the president talking about his efforts to combat diseases, especially cancer. My father, I sadly lost him to stage 4 lung cancer years ago. So to me and to my mom, I know that she was smiling when she saw that tonight, and she's probably saying a little prayer right now. But I think the president was very clear tonight in talking to the American people, especially around the middle class.
Throughout the president's speech, was there anything he mentioned, perhaps a specific policy issue, where you really saw a lot of opportunity for bipartisanship and working together with House Republicans?
I think there was talk about so many policies tonight where I was hoping that my Republican colleagues would find a way to stand up and join us in recognizing those efforts, but it seemed that they were stuck to their seats a little bit much tonight. Even when the president talked about equality, standing up to people that are very angry with attacks to people because of their faith, because of who they are, the color of their skin. Even there we should be able to find bipartisan support. Tax cuts targeted to the middle class. Workplace training programs, I mean, just on and on, research to combat diseases. Even what the president talked about with the importance of making sure that we're protecting our homeland and getting this Homeland Security funding bill properly sent to him in a way that we can get it passed and signed into law, given what's happening around the world. But in a lot of areas, it seemed to me that there should be agreement in a bipartisan basis.
And because I'm the politics editor, I have to throw in one quick question about politics to you. Do Democrats, is there a chance they could win back the House in 2016?
I'm very eager towards 2016, and the majority is definitely going to be in play. I'm working hard all across the country to make sure that candidates are eager to be able to serve their communities that best reflect their communities, whether it's driving tractors and plowing fields, or it's individuals that are emergency room physicians, or those that have served in the military. There's a lot of amazing people that have the same values and principles that I share, democratic values that I believe will represent the face of America. So I'm looking forward to a tough 2016, but one that I believe that we're going to be able to put the majority in play.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to covering you with this entire cycle. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so
I
much
hope
as
you'll
well.
join us again next year. Thank you so much. Christina, back to you.
Thanks so much, Shira. Really interesting interviews there. A couple things we'll point out. First off, I'll give you a little sneak peek of tomorrow's roll call front page, getting it today. Not too fast, we don't want our competitors to see that. But we are, of course, juggling being a multimedia company along with a print newspaper all at the same time, so it's a lot of fun. So a couple things to point out. Before the speech, President Barack Obama met briefly with 105-year-old civil rights figure Amelia Boynton, the guest of Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who's a Democrat from Alabama. She represents Selma, in fact. Really interesting. We got this from Niels Lesniewski, one of our reporters who's in the Capitol doing reporting right there. Civil rights got a very little mention.
Did Voting Rights Act. He did talk about Selma, the 50th anniversary of Selma. I guess Ms. Boynton, she was not in the gallery. There are always some interesting people floating around the Capitol on State of the Union night, even the ones who don't get into the galleries, and good for Niels for knowing who she was.
Yeah, exactly. We also have the Republicans flagged this for us. I'm trying to pull it up because, of course, we've gotten so many emails tonight. We're going to be going to Senator Joe Manchin in Statuary Hall with Shira in just a moment. They're getting him mic'd up. But Hillary Clinton put out a tweet essentially saying that the president was offering, I think, something like fairness with his economic message. And so the Republicans are saying clearly she's running for Barack Obama third term.
Well, I thought that was interesting. Yes, the tweet, which I can't find either right now.
Here it is.
The
She
language
said,
was interesting.
Barack Obama's State of the Union pointed the way to an economy that works for all. Now we need to step up and deliver for the middle class. Fair shot and fair share were her two hashtags. So an interesting take there.
And fair shot and fair share, that is the mantra that the president himself has been using now since he ran for re-election, went to actually Kansas to unveil this economic populist speech. So to me, it wasn't a moment where Hillary Clinton is tying herself to the president's rhetoric. At the same time, you would think if she's running for president, she's going to need to start creating her own persona. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Now we're going back to Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor, live in Statuary Hall with Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia and former governor.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm here with Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on our live cast. You know, the president obviously ran through a lot of different policy ideas tonight, but I noticed one thing he didn't mention was gun control. Is that a disappointment to you that he didn't mention it at all this cycle?
Well, you know, background checks is common sense, and that's what we've talked about. You know, if you go to a commercial transaction, whether it be a gun show or whether it be online, we should know the background of that person that wants to buy it, and that's just common sense. So I don't know whether he just says maybe with this Congress it's just, you know, fruitless to go down that road again. I don't know, but we'll keep trying. Keep trying.
Obviously, you're a champion of bipartisanship in your chamber. Exactly. Did you see any areas for compromise tonight specifically?
I think there's some tax codes that we could work on. I'd like to see a bigger picture. He talked about a bigger picture, but the need for the middle class, I mean, they have been pinched pretty hard. And I think the facts are right there showing that the upper class or the high end has done very well. And they've solidified up basically the safety nets, but it's people in the middle. So Wall Street's in pretty good shape. Main Street's still struggling, it's still concerned, so we need to do more about that. The tax code would change that.
And one more question, this time about politics. Your good friend, Senator Mark Kirk, a Republican from Illinois, he's up for re-election this cycle. Have you endorsed him? Do you intend to campaign for him, if so?
I think what people have a hard time understanding, the friendships that you can build in relationships. Mark is my friend. It's not Democrat or Republican or anything about politics. And I would do what I could. If my friend would ask me to help, I would do what I could.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I understand you need to get going, but thank you, and big fan of the great state of West Virginia.
Thank you. Keep coming back.
Excellent. Excellent. Christina, that was
Keep my mic
excellent.
Shira, excellent. While we have a chance, just love to get your take on the mood there. I know you're waiting for more members of Congress. Let us know what you're seeing there, what sort of the general perspective is inside Statuary Hall.
Yeah, it is quickly, as soon as the speech was done, before the president had left the chamber, the hall here started to fill up. You saw reporters flood in. You started seeing members come down the center aisle here and rushing to both sides where all of the cameras are. I swear the temperature in here has increased by at least 10 degrees already. It's just very crowded and bustling, and really everywhere you look, there are 3 journalists for every member. It's quite a sight. So you've heard a lot of members come through tonight talk about what they heard from the president's speech in terms of bipartisanship, and then also a couple Republicans, still quite a little myth that despite the fact that he emphasized that theme, he still got in a few digs about, oh, I won twice, and a couple other little things. So.
That's really interesting, Shira, especially about the temperature. I would never have known that. We're looking at the front page proofs here in the newsroom. By the way, you should be checking out all of our analysis. That's at rollcall.com and at cq.com, in addition to following us on Twitter at rollcall, at CQ Now, and of course download our iPhone app. I can't believe I didn't invest in that yet. To mention that, this is one of the best apps that is out there. We often beat the competition on breaking news, and it's free, and it is also really handy to just track what is happening inside Congress. We're going to go back now to Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor, who is live in Statuary Hall with Steny Hoyer, the minority whip from Maryland.
Thank you, Christina. That's absolutely right. I'm here with Mr. Hoyer. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
I'm glad to be with you. Thanks a lot, Sharon.
Terrific. Did you hear anything in the president's speech tonight that you think could be a basis, something achievable for the House of Representatives? You know, it's been mired in gridlock for so long to achieve.
Absolutely. First of all, the president put out that we have common values, which I think is true, and common purpose. We differ on ways and means, obviously, but Republicans talk about helping the middle class. We talk about helping the middle class. The president pointed out the economy is doing very well, but there are an awful lot of Americans who have not done very well along with the economy. He focused on taking steps to help them get to a place where we want them to be. I think that's an agreed upon objective. Now we need to work together on ways and means to do it. There'll be disagreements, but the answer to your question is I think we can. John Boehner has talked about helping average working Americans. We talk about helping average working Americans. Average working Americans would be pretty ticked off at all of us if we talk the talk but don't walk the walk.
This president has not necessarily been known for having terrific relationship with Congress. Tonight, among your House Democratic caucus, what do you think were the big applause lines? What did they really enjoy hearing?
Well, I think they really enjoyed hearing about helping the middle class, about building a stronger middle class, about making sure the middle class can get the education they need, the skills they need, that we can expand manufacturing jobs, which pay good wages. I think that was some of the big applause lines on our side of the aisle. I think the fact that America is back, America is strong, America has grown its economy beyond either Europe or Asia, that we've created 11 million jobs in the last 6 years, that we have substantially decreased unemployment, that the deficit is a third of what it once was. So all of those, I think Democrats are proud of what we've done, but the president's right. Looking back is not the issue. Looking forward and looking at what we need to do is the issue. And I think John Boehner wants to do that. And I certainly look forward to working with him towards that end.
Great. And obviously this is one of the president's final, second to last State of the Union speech. There will be another president giving speeches in a couple years, maybe along those lines, maybe not. When was the last time you spoke to former Secretary of State Clinton? Recently?
Gee, I'm trying to thank you. It's been a couple of months.
Yeah, it's been a couple of months?
Yeah, since I've seen her. I saw her at a rally in November for Lieutenant Governor Brown, who I was strongly supporting. He didn't make it, but she was there supporting him. And I'm a big fan of Hillary Clinton's. And I'm a big fan of President Clinton's. And I think if she runs, she's going to do very well.
All right, now let's now go to next year when the president delivers his final State of the Union address. Ideally, what would you want him to say? What would you think would be the big victories he could accomplish in this next years with Congress?
Well, I think if we can get tax reform done, that will be a big victory. He's had some big victories. We had a Recovery and Reinvestment Act in his first 30 days of his term that, in my view, were very, very responsible for bringing this economy back better than any other economy in the world, and creating jobs, bringing the deficit down. That bill also had a tremendous impact on the environment, on alternative energies. He's proud of the fact that under his administration, gas prices have come down, not because necessarily of something he did, but the context in the world economy. So I think this president, in the last year of his term, is going to look back on what has been done, what has been accomplished, hopefully what we accomplished in this Congress. But I predict to you that he will be looking forward, not backward. He will be looking at to what we can do in the next Congress to strengthen what we've done in the first year of this Congress, and say that it's not time to rest. It's not time to just rest on your laurels, and he'll continue to say it's important for us to work together, because he believes that. And my experience is this president has taken an awful lot of time and effort to try to work with our Republican colleagues. I don't think they feel that, but as someone who sat in a room with him for a very long period of time with Republicans to trying to get us on a fiscally sustainable path, I believe that. No president I've seen has spent any more time trying to sit down and reason together with the opposite party than Barack Obama.
Well, we'll see what happens in the next year. We'll see if you're right.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a
much.
lot. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Christina, back to you at Roll Call headquarters. Christina?
Interview with House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer, a Democrat from Maryland. That's Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor. If you're just tuning in with us, it is the top of the 11 o'clock hour. And of course, rollcall.com is the place to be. The speeches are over. We're pulling together highlights. We've just sent the paper out the door for tomorrow's print edition. And now we're posting online. And I am Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor, here in the Roll Call newsroom with David Hawkins, our senior editor. And Shira's been doing a great job with all of those member interviews there. We've also got a whole team of reporters on Capitol Hill, gathering, straying, and different intel for stories, for feeds, and for us to talk about here. So one really interesting one coming from one of our Senate reporters, Humberto Sanchez. He says Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn, he's a Republican from Texas, said he was disappointed with the president's State of the Union speech, saying his whole tone is defiant. He noted that Obama did mention possible areas of agreement, cybersecurity, trade, possibly taxes. But here's the quote. But he is so detached and uninvolved with the legislative process. He just speaks as if he were on Mount Olympus saying, if you sent this to me, I will veto it. That's not the recipe for getting anything done. And that's a very succinct way to sum up sort of some of the thematic problems we've discussed with the way Barack Obama interacts with Congress, David. But it also really sums up, I think, how a lot of Republicans feel at this point. And Cornyn is someone who has worked together and achieved legislation.
Cornyn is a bit of a legislative middleman on some deals, but he's and for the last 2 years we wondered about John Cornyn because he was facing actually a challenge from the Tea Party right for his renomination. He seemed to tack somewhat to the right, associated himself more with the Ted Cruz confrontational style of Republicanism. Some were expecting that now that he's been in his first full term as the Senate majority whip, that he'd take a different tack. So this is it's sort of an interestingly unvarnished view of the way so many Republicans they've grown tired of the guy, and they're just not willing to cut him much slack at all.
Well, we are going to toss back to Shira Center in Statuary Hall in just a moment. And then thank you very much, David Hawkins. You've been awesome with your analysis tonight. We're going to hear next from Stephen Dennis, who's our White House correspondent and Senate editor, wears two very important hats here. We'll be back with him in a moment. But first, we're going to Shira Center, Roll Call's politics editor. She is live in Statuary Hall with Brenda Lawrence from Michigan.
Thank you so much. Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence from the Detroit area in Michigan, thank you so much for joining us following your first State of the Union address.
Yes.
Now, what's it like being in the chamber versus watching it at home, right?
watching it at home, you listen to the message, but sitting in that chair, you think about the work you have to do, and it's a different reaction because we do need to do that. We need to work on that. I give you an example. When he hit a home run, when he said that child care is not a woman's issue, it's an economic issue, and who should choose between a sick child and their job, sick leave pay. And you know, that closing, asking the Congress to work together, I was a mayor, and I'm used to getting things done. And I came to Congress wanting to continue to work and get things done and reach across the aisle. We have different opinions, but it shouldn't stop us from doing the work that the people sent us here to do. So, you know, it was very moving for me to sit there and think about the work I need to do and looking across the aisle and saying, you know, we've got it, we don't have a choice. We must do this.
When you look back at tonight in 5, 10, 20 years, is there going to be a specific moment from the speech that you're really going to remember, or maybe just a specific moment from tonight, perhaps walking in through the chamber doors?
Well, walking in tonight and looking at all of the colleagues, and think about how powerful that is. In that room were all the people who were sent by the people to the people's house to do the people's work. And it was like, I'm one of them now. And so while before I could criticize or say I don't like what they're doing, now I have to make it happen. I have to reach across, I have to debate those issues. And I'm hopeful. I know our freshman class, we have talked to Republicans and Democrats, and we said we're going to work together and we're going to be different. And so I'm hopeful that we can make a change, this freshman class that just came in.
The president struck a very positive tone on the economy. He basically said the state of our union is strong. But you come from an area of the country that's had a really tough recovery in terms of the economy. I mean, do you agree the state of our union is strong economically, at least from your district?
Absolutely. The foreclosure crisis, the manufacturing crisis with our auto industry, unemployment, all of those things. We were hit hard in Detroit and in the metro area, and the economy is so much better. More people are back to work. And he hit a strong note. There are people in manufacturing that are working now, but they're doing different type of jobs. That's why this retraining and the community college, there are adults out there that were very strong in manufacturing, but they had to learn new skills, new technology, so that they can become employed again. So he hit it right, the nail right on the head with that. And I can tell you, coming from one of the hardest hit parts of our country with this economy, it's absolutely better.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on your election, Congresswoman. And we'll see you again very soon, I hope. Christina, from Statuary Hall, this is Shira Center. Back to you.
Excellent. Hi. Thanks so much, Sherry. You did a great job. Of course, I'm multitasking by tweeting that Stephen T. Dennis and I are now live here at the Roll Call newsroom camera for our State of the Union watch party. You are watching Shira Center, our politics editor, interview members of Congress live from Statuary Hall. We have a lot more coming up, so stick with us here at rollcall.com. Also, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Roll Call. Now, Steve, you have been pulling a very long day.
Yes.
You were at the White House. You got the sort of embargoed, detailed briefing.
Yep.
You were covering the speech. You just got your story in completely on time. We made our deadline for tonight's paper. Couldn't be happier. What did you make of tonight? You've covered a lot of these speeches.
You know, I think the president was trying to, he was trying to get past what a lot of State of the Unions have, which is just people getting up and clapping and all these applause lines, and then it all falls apart. He's given a lot of these speeches where, he has 20 new ideas and 18 of them just crash and burn. And, I think most of his new ideas in this State of the Union probably are also going to crash and burn. The White House is kind of acknowledging, they're acknowledging that most of the things that he's talking about, whether it be free college or some of these other ideas that are probably poll really well or are popular, and they're probably not going to pass this Congress, but they are going to sort of give him some sort of agenda to talk about when Republicans are talking about repealing health care for the 53rd time. They want to say, look, we have a positive agenda to do something that people want. After getting the drubbing that they got in the midterm elections, this president needed something to talk about, needed something to look forward to, and something that he can push, even if it's not with this Congress, to try to move the country. This is a chance to really, the way they want to sort of frame it is this is a way for the next 15 years. And sort of the end of his speech, I think, was kind of the heart of where Obama is right now.
Sure.
It wasn't, he didn't talk that much about free community college. He didn't talk much about his individual proposals, but he spent a lot of time talking about changing the politics in Washington, something he's utterly failed to do.
And something he's always seemed to genuinely want to do.
Yeah, I mean, ever since he, gave that, we're not red states, blue states speech that shot him onto the national scene.
In 2004 as the keynote speaker at the Democratic National Convention.
And he's kind of, as president, he's kind of blown it. And there's a line in this speech where he talks about we all need to. It was an inclusive thing. It wasn't just you Republicans need to come to the table.
Let's do this. Let's stop going on cable news, in fact.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you right there, Steve, just for a minute. We're going to go back to Shira Center, our politics editor for Roll Call. She is live in Statuary Hall with Congressman Mark Sanford, a congressman who is from South Carolina, Republican, and a former governor as well.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you, Congressman Sanford, for joining Roll Call's live cast this evening. We very much appreciate it.
Pleasure.
The president spoke a lot about bipartisanship this evening. The entire last page of his speech seemed to attribute it to that. Do you think there's room in this Congress for bipartisanship in the president's last 2 lame duck years of his term?
I would say we all hope so. I think that you talk to people in my congressional district or others across this country, there are a lot of people very much hoping for results out of Congress. I think that the midterm congressional elections, to a great degree, were about can we get more in the way of results out of Congress. But in fairness, I don't know that we're going to get there. The president seems to have tacked in the opposite direction of where the electorate came in November. And I was here in the early 90s. I remember President Clinton, when Republicans took the House and Senate in the early 90s, saying the era of big government was over. It wasn't over, but in fairness to President Clinton, he tacked to the right. You saw welfare reform passed. You saw a number of balanced budgets. This president doesn't seem to be doing it. He seems to say, I'm going to continue to take unilateral action. I'm going to continue to use my veto pen. And I'm going to continue to lay out some agenda items that seem to be at odds with what the electorate just said in November.
You mentioned your experience here in Congress in the 1990s. Any ways in which that is different from this experience today watching State of the Union? Any other ways?
I mean, the institution itself is remarkably the same. I mean, amazingly human institution, amazingly human dynamic in the way that members of Congress interact on bills and ideas that they believe in or disagree on. But I'd say obviously a very different security overlay than when I left. I would say a degree of focus on fundraising that probably wasn't there when I was there in the 1990s. And now, as you move into the last couple of years of his presidency, a degree of partisanship that you see in this chapter. But frankly, during the Clinton years, there was a lot of partisanship as well. So I don't know that part has changed all that much.
Amongst your colleagues in the House Republican Conference, did you notice them perk up or seem amenable to any of the president's ideas specifically tonight? Maybe a few of them stood when he mentioned a particular policy point?
There was a bit of I don't know, comedy, levity, when he talked about energy independence, but a lot of folks obviously on the right side of the aisle saying, wait a minute, here's the guy that's going to veto the Keystone Pipeline. I don't know how those two go together. I would say, in fairness to the president, I stood. I think I was the only Republican that stood.
Yeah, when did you stand?
When he talked about Cuba. I think that, though it's not necessarily a popular issue with the Republicans, I think fundamental to the rights that we enjoy as Americans, amongst our different liberties, is the liberty to travel, to come and go as you please, without mandate or edict from a federal government. And with our government, you or I could travel to any country in this globe, save for one, and that's Cuba. You could travel to North Korea, you could travel to Syria. It may not work out well for you, but in fairness, the federal government would not prohibit you from going there. That's not the case with Cuba. And in this case, I think, based on the constitutional liberties that we were guaranteed by our founding fathers, and based on a policy that hadn't worked over 50 years, it's important to try something different. So I stood there. I stood when he talked about trade promotion. I come from a coastal district. Trade is very, very important to the port in Charleston. And I stood when he talked about coming to Congress for authorization with regard to military action against ISIL. I think that Republican and Democratic president alike have gone off onto a very strange tangent wherein they just sort of declare we're sending troops wherever. And yet very clear within the Founding Fathers framework was this notion of coming to the Congress for authorization, because at the end of a conflict, body bags don't flow back to Washington, D.C. They go to congressional districts across this country. And so I think that authorization is very, very important.
I have one more quick question for you, and that's about Cuba. Have you booked your ticket yet? Are you going to go soon?
I haven't. Have you?
No, but I'd like to.
All right, well, that makes two of us.
Maybe I can cover a Codell down
There you
there,
go.
right?
There you go.
Maybe. Thank you so much, Congressman Sanford. Very, very much. Christina, back to you at CQ Roll Call World Headquarters.
Thanks very much, Shira Center, our politics editor, live in Statuary Hall. Many more member reactions coming up. Again, these are the people who are really going to be shaping what's happening in the 114th Congress. By the way, if you want to know about the 114th Congress, CQ and Roll Call are the places to do that. At the bottom of every story we post, we give you a link to our guide to the new Congress, which is profiles of every single freshman member who was elected in November. So it's a really useful tool that I think everybody should download, and maybe I'm a little biased to say that, but I do have the camera, so I'm going to go ahead and say that. So here I am still with Stephen T. Dennis, who is our White House correspondent and Senate editor. Steve, we talked a little bit about what was in the speech, but what was missing from the speech, given how long you've covered President Obama? What did you notice he didn't include?
Well, there was a real pivot from President Obama this year. In previous years, ever since the Republicans took back the House in 2010, the president's talked about having some kind of a grand bargain on the deficit, where you pair entitlements with tax increases and have some kind of big package. He's talked about in the past, he's talked about getting rid of this sequester budget deal to increase spending on domestic priorities. And he didn't mention the word sequester. The only time he mentioned the word deficit was to say that it's come down, not that we need to cut it anymore.
No words on debt ceiling, which has been such a threat.
Yeah, that he wanted to when he talked in the beginning about turning the page, it's like he was, one of the things he was turning the page on was the era of austerity, of we're cutting, of coming together to dole out pain. And that might actually help him in the polls, I think, a little bit, because when you give a speech and it's all about how much pain somebody's going to have, and maybe we're going to cut Medicare, and maybe we're going to cut Social Security, and everybody starts getting weak-kneed, this time it was much more of like, hey, free college. And that shift, I asked the officials in the background briefing, is this because the president doesn't think that kind of a deal is possible anymore? Or is it because the deficit is down so much? And it seemed like it was more of the latter, that the president at this point thinks the deficit's doing well enough, the economy's doing well enough. He doesn't need to be talking about big cuts to Medicare, big cuts to Social Security. Instead, it's time to start investing again in things like transportation, like college, these kind of like basic little middle class things. But if you take, what he was talking about, these are relatively modest proposals. Right. And to put this in perspective, his big tax proposal to pay for all these new initiatives is about $300 billion over 10 years. That's less than 1% of the entire taxes we're going to collect over the next 10 years. We're going to collect $40 trillion in taxes. If his, deal works out, it'll still be about $40 trillion in taxes over 10 years. So it's really tinkering with the edges. It reminds me a little bit of Bill Clinton sort of going a little small ball after he lost the Congress.
But with a lot of different things to really show how busy he was.
A lot of different things. A lot of, hey, I'm going to take, I'm going to do these little things, like I'm going to make mortgages a little bit cheaper, and I'm going to take whatever actions I can. But I think probably the most important thing he said, which everybody knew he was going to say, and he's been articulating for weeks now, is, his veto pen is prepared to get busy for the first time since he's been president.
Well, and you were still finishing up your story, but Shira was interviewing Don Beyer a few minutes ago, and he said that he's actually headed to the White House for a healthcare meeting tomorrow morning, which is interesting. We're going to go back to Shira Center now, who is live in Statuary Hall with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who we actually talked about earlier in the broadcast with David Hawkins, because she always stakes out a spot there in the chamber very early in the day. Shira Center, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm about to ask Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee about that very sacred spot right now. So what time did you have to get here today to secure a spot in the aisle to see the president's speech?
Early, and I've got a lot of followers. There are a lot of people joining us, and so there was a whole collection of individuals, members of Congress, who understand how important it is, one, to ensure your constituents know that you're working, and two, there's a lot of work done along those aisles, talking to senators, talking to cabinet officers. There's a lot of work done. So we enjoy it. And we also think it's the House of Representatives, it's wonderful to have a welcoming spirit when people come into our house, the people's house.
This is not your first State of the Union. This is your 21st, you said?
It is that.
Yes. And is there one out of the 20 that really sticks out in your mind as particularly memorable?
Well, I think every time there was a time when we were in the midst of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, certainly those were potent times when presidents were trying to explain. In this instance, it was President Bush. Certainly, there were moments of this presidency that were very moving. The first one, of course, the first African-American president, when all eyes were on his leadership, there was a great sense of excitement, and there still is. And then why not say this one? I thought this was a great State of the Union, and the reason why I thought it was so good and so potent is because the president didn't show any signs of giving up or the end of his term or just 2 years more for me to serve. He took the reins and said, I'm going to work on behalf of the American people, and I want an economic upheaval to help working families, from minimum wage to child care, to expanded educational opportunities, and I was excited about that. And I thought that it was lively, and it was demanding and commanding, and it showed the president's commitment and investment in this country.
Did you disagree with anything the president said tonight?
Well, I think there's going to be quite a bit of vigorous debate on fast track. And I hope that members of Congress will have the opportunity to engage. Our concerns, for those of us who are concerned, is where are the jobs? I don't want my constituents to lose more jobs. I've got to be shown that definitively that there will be jobs that will come to the 18th Congressional District and Houston, Texas, just like there will be in America. And then, of course, I think the president is right about coming to the Congress for the authorization to use military force. That needs to be an extended, long debate, but I'm unsure of moving ahead for another war in this country. I think we should collaborate with our allies and approach the fight against terrorism in many ways, including military force in collaboration with our allies, but not a declaration of war. And then we should also look to the diplomatic approach, reaching the hearts and minds of individuals before they can get radicalized.
And looking ahead 21 years from now, back at tonight, right? Is there going to be a specific moment during the president's speech that you'll remember?
Well, I think he had a sense of humor when he said, I'm not running again. There was a little bit of noise in the chamber. And he said, I understand why you're excited because I won both of those races, so I'm a force to deal with. But I also think emotionally, I was glad that he brought up reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act and criminal justice reform. We've experienced a lot of pain for many of the families who've lost their sons. Many of these names we know, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir, and others. And he didn't gloss over it. He understood that we have law enforcement officers that are here to protect and serve, and they do that. And he said, why can't we come together and reform the criminal justice system? I like the way he put that forward, so it can be an American effort to make the law enforcement system better for all of us. And then, of course, this is the 50th year of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Very emotional for many of us. Our districts, many of the districts that gave an opportunity for African Americans to be elected to come to the United States Congress, my predecessor, Barbara Jordan, only could have happened with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. It's a shame. that this Congress is blocking it. And I really ask the Speaker, in the 50th year of commemorating that day, Bloody Sunday, when so many were brutalized, and the signature of President Johnson on this great bill, why is the Republican Congress blocking the putting this bill on the floor and giving an up or down vote to be able to make sure that everyone has a right to vote? This is about voter suppression. This is not about one race, one neighborhood, one party. It's really about voter opportunity and empowerment. I can't imagine why Republicans would want to deny people the unfettered right to vote. So it's a challenge, Speaker Boehner. Let's put the Voting Rights Act on the floor of the House, give us a chance to debate it, and let's vote it up or down. I can't imagine, again, that Republicans will want to vote against their own interests, which is the right for people to vote.
Right. And are you optimistic that'll happen?
Well, I'm hoping the challenge will be such that the people will rise up in a nonviolent petitioning manner and let this House know and let the Senate know that this is what America needs. There are too many people being denied the right to vote, even today in 2015. So my optimism is that this Congress will do the right thing.
All right, one more question for you. It's been reported that your colleague, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, might be interested in being ambassador to Cuba. Would you support that?
I absolutely would. I've gone to Cuba with Congresswoman Lee and in other occasions or other delegations, and I know how hard she has worked and continued to work on Cuba-U.S. relations. I am supportive of the new actions by the President of the United States. I'm excited about it. When I've gone to Cuba, I've interacted not only with President Castro, but I've interacted with the people. And the people love America. There is a great connection between Cubans and the United States. I know that there were some tragic actions of the government in times past that many people can't get over, but I'm hoping that we can find common ground to be able to work through those issues. But this is the right direction. It's exciting. And let me say this, besides releasing Alan Gross, the Cuban government met its request that the president made and released about 50 prisoners, I believe. What more can you say of a country that really wants to begin to have the kind of diplomatic relations that will enhance both nations, Cuba and the United States?
Have you booked your tickets yet? Are you going there?
I am looking to be on a future CODEL, and I'm hoping to go to the summit that will be held soon in the region, and I think this is going to be just a great start for this country.
Is this a congressional summit that's going to be held soon?
No, it's the Organization of American States, OAS, that summit will be going forward, and Cuba will, I think, be there for the first time.
Wow. Terrific. Well, thank you so much. We very much appreciate you stopping by our live stream, and we hope you'll join us next year after that State of the Union, the President's final one.
Final one. This is great. Thank you so very much.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you. Perfect. Christina, I just finished speaking with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from the Houston area.
Learned a lot from all of the members that you've talked to. I think that's probably our last one, but we're going to come back to you if there are some others. So thanks very much to, again, Shira Center, our politics editor in Statuary Hall. So again, I'm Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor-in-chief here in the Roll Call newsroom. We have put the paper to bed, and now there's nothing left to do but analysis. And I'm lucky enough to be joined by Stephen Dennis, the White House correspondent and Senate editor for Roll Call. So, Steve, I mean, we've talked a lot about all the different policies, taxes and this plan. We talked about the sort of size of this plan. Is there any hope for changing the tax code in the coming year?
Yeah, I think there is. I think if you look at this as sort of Obama putting out his marker, here are things I like. The idea that he's going to get another tax increase out of this Congress is ridiculous. It's just not going to happen. Just get that out of your brain. It just won't happen. But if there is a broader tax reform, which a lot of Republicans are talking about, that's revenue neutral, that overall doesn't raise taxes, some of these ideas could make it into that package. And, you know, I think there's at least some cause for optimism along those lines. You have Paul Ryan, the most ambitious, youngest, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in a long time with a national profile.
Right.
And then you've got Orrin Hatch, the Senate Finance Chairman, who has probably his name on more of our laws than anybody else in Congress right now. He knows how to get things done. it's still unlikely that with this president, this president has had such a hard time working across the aisle. He's had such a hard time even calling people. John Cornyn, who, we talked about earlier.
Right, we've got this Orrin Hatch one.
Yeah, Orrin Hatch was not a big fan of the speech. I mean, but John Cornyn, the number 2 Senate Republican, basically has never gotten a phone call from the president, in 6 years. John Cornyn is the kind of guy who could be a deal maker. If you have John Cornyn on your side, suddenly it's easier to do immigration. Suddenly it's easier to do some of these things that are heavy lifts. And you're not going to get him on your side if you don't even try. And so it remains to be seen if the president's actually going to start doing that kind of thing. I happened to talk to Orrin Hatch in the hallway about a week ago in the Senate, and I asked him, so, Orrin, the president's really going to need you to pass some of these big proposals he's going to come out with. Has he reached out to you? And he laughed at me. It was such a ridiculous idea to him that this president would reach out to him. And he said, look, he should. He should. I can be helpful.
Right, it might actually work with him if he gave me a call.
Exactly. And, it's just something that this president has a hard time doing, but maybe he'll look in the mirror tomorrow, reread that last part of his speech where we can all get along.
Right.
And start picking up the phone, and we'll see. One thing that's interesting is the president's going to 2 states, 2 red states, Idaho and Kansas. And
Going back to Lawrence, he's now done, this will be his at least 3rd speech in that same location.
Yeah, but Idaho's one of the states he's never been to.
Right.
And the White House is intentionally going to red states, going to, in the case of Idaho, a state he hasn't been to before. He wants to sort of broaden his message, reach out to red state land, if you will, because he knows he has to deal with Republicans now. Now, the question is whether when he gets back to Washington, he sort of keeps it up. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works. There are, these 3 or 4 issues that he mentioned today that Republicans did stand up and cheer on. Cybersecurity, everybody wants that. A trade deal, Republicans want that more than Democrats. Some kind of tax reform, some kind of infrastructure deal has, at least some of that has to happen because there's all these deadlines that get triggered. But, then you got that veto threat. They're going to have to deal with the president too. So
that's the perfect transition, Steve Dennis, to our closing and our farewell to this terrific Roll Call State of the Union Watch Party. And I think that we should do that by giving our own So Too in 3 words. This is, again, a big roll call project we've been doing on Twitter and Instagram today, and we'll be including this in roll call's pages tomorrow. We're going to have this online, but right now we're going to talk about ours. So, Steve, you go first. Your So Too in 3 words. You have to get your Twitter handle on there.
Oh,
that's part of it. Shear's got to write her Twitter handle on there too. We're going to come to Shear. I'm spoiler alert. Okay. So, Steve's So Too in 3 words.
All right, my So Too in 3 words: veto, defiant, optimistic. It's a little bit of a jangly kind of combo platter, but that's what the speech was.
And your Twitter handle is at Stephen T. Dennis. All right, so mine, which I pulled up here, So Too in 3 words, my Twitter handle is at @CBellantoni, and I went with short, one of the shortest the president has ever given. I'm calling it non-lofty. This was not a big, broadly thought out, bold proposal speech. This was everything he's been talking about from the moment he became a candidate, lumped into one with some policy proposals wrapped around it, but it's very similar ideas. And then finally, I'm going to say relaxed. This is someone I've covered for many years. I first was covering him when he was not even elected yet, and he was campaigning for people in other states because he had already knew he was going to win his race in Illinois. And when he's nervous, he gets kind of itchy, and he was touching his face, he's scratching his head, he's pulling at his shirt. And this was somebody who seemed very, very comfortable in that chamber, perhaps for the first time, truly relaxed. So that's mine. Now, Shira Center, you have to give us your Twitter handle and your State of the Union in 3 words. Here's 3 words are bipartisanship, prosperity, and sure test, because we think it is. Here we're getting the microphone. Bipartisanship, prosperity, and shortest. She and I was on the same wavelength there. I want to give a huge thanks to our sponsor, Earth Justice, who made tonight's live stream possible. We are going to have highlights from this and highlights from both the president's speech and Senator Joni Ernst's speech at rollcall.com tomorrow. Of course, you're going to read all the analysis at rollcall.com. Subscribe to our newsletters, get our iPhone app, follow us on Twitter. I mean, just every way you can get roll call information that's possible, you should be doing it, because we are the best, and we are going to take you inside of Congress along with us and help you really understand what's going to happen next in the 114th Congress. So thanks very much to Shira Center, our politics editor, who was live in Statuary Hall. That was all possible thanks to her awesome production team, our partners at FedNet, Bridget Bowman, one of our great reporters here who came up through television and was helping as a producer there, and then our multimedia editor, Meredith Dake, who was there on hand. Shayna Westlake helped us get all of the member interviews. We've got an entire team in the newsroom. I can't even name everybody, but they are all in the credits you're going to see when we close out tonight, and make sure to give them a little applause, and I'm going to do that for making Deadline. And thanks to everybody. Awesome team. I'm here with Steve Dennis, White House correspondent. David Hawkins was on earlier, and I'm Christina Bellantoni, Roll Call's editor-in-chief, signing off, saying thank you, see you at our next watch party, and have a great, safe night.